Welcome to the fantasy audiobook, Harry Potter. I, Uchiha Itachi, become a wizard in the Harry Potter world. Chapter 61. Julian, who gathered with Hagrid, gave a general account of tonight's events. Of course, he did not mention the battle with Voldemort and the invitation from the Centaur and Unicorn tribes. After hearing Julian's words, everyone sighed for a while, because Julian's experience tonight was indeed a bit rich. After confirming that the injured unicorn had been healed by Julian, Hagrid left the Forbidden Forest with everyone. The six huddled in Hagrid's hut for one night, and returned to Hogwarts Castle early the next morning with Filch, who came to find them. Because he promised the unicorn and the centaur to visit their tribe, Julian took advantage of these 2 days to go to the library to find information about the centaur. As for the information about the unicorn, because Julian every dream will dream about the relationship with unicorns. Julian has already looked up all the information about unicorns in the library. According to the centaur information that Julian found in the library, the centaur is an ancient race that even appeared before wizards appeared in the world. It is said that there were far more centaurs than now. Far away there is also a country composed of only horses in the plains, and the name of the country is Rohan. The horses in this country make a living as child shepherds and mercenaries. Because of the innate physical advantages of the horse people, the horse country at that time was very powerful in terms of force, and many races would pay tribute to them in 857, including humans. Seeing this, Julian couldn't help but gasped. Unexpectedly, those reckless centaurs had such a glorious past. As for the origin of the centaur, the book is not very clear. It only says that they came out of the forest suddenly, and then established a kingdom of the centaur at an extremely fast speed, and the system of this country is perfect. The hierarchy, the strictness far surpassed all countries in the world at that time. That's why this country was able to quickly dominate the world, and it was so powerful that it even made all the countries pay tribute at that time. Although the horse people's country is strong and prosperous, the country's decline time is as fast as its establishment. The horse people's civilization has developed to its peak in almost 300 years, and then a big event suddenly appeared on the entire continent, and the whole world, all intelligent races, including the centaurs, took part in this event. Also because of this incident, the civilization of the horse people declined rapidly, and it lost its former glory in just 100 years. The remaining centaur royal family took the rest of the centaurs and fled back to the forest where they first appeared, and one of them survived to this day. Julian closed the book in his hand, put it back on the bookshelf, stretched out his hand and squeezed his brow and thought to himself, if nothing unexpected happened, the forest where the centaur suddenly appeared should be the Forbidden Forest, so the people in the Forbidden Forest now isn't the centaur tribe, the remaining centaur royal family back then. At that time, human wizards were not yet popular, and the number of wizards in the entire human tribe was less than 50. What major event happened at that time, which caused the decline of the centaur tribe so quickly, and why has it never been seen in the history of Muggles? It mentioned the existence of a foreign country that was once so powerful. Confused, Inrian returned to the Gryffindor common room. Lying on the bed, Julian kept thinking about what he had just read in the book and then gradually fell asleep. In the dream, Julian came to the grassland and the lake again. When they came to the lake, the unicorn was still standing there, but this time Julian was not bounced off immediately to wake up. Julian quietly walked to the unicorn and asked, "Who are you, where are you, and why am I here?" The unicorn didn't answer Julian immediately, but just looked at Julian quietly. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to answer him, Julian followed the example of a unicorn and just looked at the other party. One person and one unicorn just looked at each other quietly. Finally, as if he had had enough of the silence, the unicorn spoke. Its voice was so gentle, like a warm hot spring, making Julian as comfortable as soaking in the hot spring. "My name is Yolanda. In a sense, I am like the queen of the unicorn family. As for where this place is, you should be very clear about this question, right? Why bother asking me again?" Yolanda said. "This is my sea of spiritual consciousness, right?" Julian asked, slightly guessing. "Or the sea of spirit and magic is more appropriate, Julian, look." As soon as Yolanda's voice fell, Julian found himself and Yolanda's bodies floating up, and soon they rose into the sky. "From here, the lake represents your magic power, and the grassland represents your spiritual power," Yolanda said. When the two are in balance, everything is calm here, and when the two are out of balance. As soon as Yolanda finished speaking, the world before Julian's eyes began to change. The originally calm and transparent lake suddenly surged, and the black water instantly stained the entire lake, while the original emerald green grassland quickly turned sandy yellow. That's it. Yolanda spoke again. As Yolanda's voice fell, the lake and grassland changed back to their original appearance again. It looks scary, but what's the point? Julian asked, puzzled. Yolanda replied in a calm tone, the lake turning black means that your magic power has been contaminated with evil spirits. I will explain to you what evil spirits are in a moment. The yellow grassland means that your spiritual power has begun to dry up. Either of these two phenomena is not good news for you. After hearing Yolanda's words, Julian nodded thoughtfully, and then asked, I see, what is the so-called evil spirit? Evil aura refers to the evil aura residing in the spell itself. Do you know why too much use of black magic will cause the wizard's character to become cruel and cruel? It's not relying on the user's heart as you said, but rather it is because there are evil spirits stored in the black magic spells. Excessive use of black magic will cause your sea of magic power to be infiltrated with evil spirits, and the grassland of spiritual power has no time to purify the evil spirits in the sea of magic power, so the evil spirits in the sea of magic power will react. It has polluted the wizard's spiritual power grassland, weakened the wizard's spiritual power, and caused the wizard's personality to undergo a drastic change. Yolanda replied. Then what you mean is, as long as you use a small amount of black magic to purify the evil energy quickly with your mental power, you don't have to worry about the evil energy pollution brought by black magic. Julian asked. That's right, it's true in theory, but generally most wizards, once they experience the power of black magic, they will soon fall into the quagmire of black magic, and they can't pull it out. Therefore, Julian, no matter you in any situation, try not to use black magic, and you must keep it in mind. Yolanda said seriously. Hearing Yolanda's serious tone, Julian nodded, indicating that he understood. Then, the last question, why did you appear in my sea of spirit and magic power? Julian asked suspiciously. This matter is an arrangement of fate. Julian, you have my blood flowing through your body. It is not an exaggeration to say that you are my descendant, but the magic power contained in our unicorn blood is too strong. Pure, so among the descendants, most of our bloodlines are invisible, and your mother is the successor of my bloodline, but because she is too ordinary, she did not inherit the ability of my bloodline, and you, Julian, although I know what caused my bloodline to mutate into such an evil shadowy ability, but the power of your eyes is indeed mutated because of my bloodline. Yolanda explained. Hearing what Yolanda said, Julian not only smacked his mouth, but also followed the blood inheritance boundary of my Uchiha clan to you to become a mutation of your blood. It can really be broken. But Julian did not refute Yolanda. Since Yolanda misunderstood, let her continue to misunderstand, and there will be an official explanation in the future, and I just can't think of a way to fool them about the origin of my Sharingan. Julian pretended to be curious and asked, but Yolanda, unicorns are the purest creatures in the world, why do my eyes look so evil? Well, there is a saying in human beings called, extreme things must be reversed. It is because we unicorns are the purest creatures in the world, so our blood carries a strong curse. Your eyes may have inherited the curse in my blood, that's why it looks so evil. Yolanda explained. Oh, so that's the case. Julian nodded and responded with a look of sudden realization. No, Yolanda, you haven't explained why you are in my sea of consciousness. Julian asked. As for why I appear here, it is related to your magic wand. Although I don't know where the maker of this magic wand found it, I can sense that your magic wand contains a drop of my magic wand. Essence blood, it is because of this drop of essence blood that my remnant soul is awakened in your sea of consciousness. Yolanda explained. Then have you been living in my sea of consciousness? Julian asked eagerly. After all, no normal person wants to have a ray of intelligent and thinking soul in his body, even though it is incomplete. As if feeling Julian's thoughts, Yolanda said with a smile, of course you don't need it. If you don't want me to stay in your body like this, you need to help me find the treasure of our unicorn family. Starlight Crystal. After you get the Starlight Crystal, my remnant soul can live in the Starlight Crystal. Ah, that's what I said, but the Starlight Crystal is here, where can I find it? Julian said with a bitter face. That's your business. If you want me to leave your body as soon as possible, you'd better find it quickly. After 30 days, aren't you going to visit the unicorn tribe in the Forbidden Forest? You can ask they. Oh, yes, when you go to the unicorn tribe, you must remember to bring some recovery potions. Yolanda said irresponsibly. But, just when Julian was about to say something, the familiar force descended on Julian's body again, pulling Julian back to reality. In the process of being pulled back, Julian glanced at Yolanda. Although there was no expression on Yolanda's face, Julian instinctively felt that Yolanda was smiling, and the smile was very treacherous. Julian, who was sitting up straight, stared blankly at the moonlight coming in from the window. Julian smiled wryly, and cursed secretly. Yolanda, it seems to be tricked, it seems that this tribe of unicorns must leave, it's been a while. After all, Julian lay on the bed again and fell asleep. The 30-day deadline was coming soon, and Julian kept accumulating magic power during these 30 days, trying to break through. He succeeded, and he consolidated and broadened his spirit and the sea of magic power again. During these 30 days, Julian kept looking for all relevant information about that period of history, but that period of history seemed to be erased from history, and Julian could not find any information from other places, even the restricted area. Only the 3 words, that matter, were used instead. The helpless Julian can only put his hope in the Hogwarts official history in his hands. Fortunately, Julian's magical powers have been enhanced again so that he can read the Hogwarts canon again. Julian found many answers in the newly opened first chapter of the Hogwarts canon, but also dug many holes. This first chapter is about the Centaur Kingdom Rohan and its history that once ruled the entire Earth a long time ago. How did humans defeat the centaurs? Why wizards should hide, and other questions have been answered in this chapter. Most of it is the same as the history Julian found in the library, but it is more detailed. For example, here is the name and life of the first Centaur King. The first Centaur King was called Lavis Archibald. According to the book, he was a wise, brave and noble king. He led 100,000 centaur out of the misty swamp and through the dangerous darkness. The forest and the vast sea came to the present Hulan Balar Prairie. King Lavis led his centaur cavalry to sweep across the entire grassland, and established a powerful kingdom on the grassland mountains, Rohan. However, the rule of the centaurs was bloody and brutal, and the cruel centaurs quickly aroused the dissatisfaction of the human beings. Human beings who can use the blood of a magical creature or intelligent life, and thus can use magic, opened the gates of hell at the cost of their lives, and released countless demons. The 12 sages made an oath with the big devil: as long as one of the 12 sages is still alive, the demon clan will never invade human beings. At the beginning, the demon clan obeyed the oath and has been occupying the territories of other intelligent life forms, such as centaurs, elves, goblins and dragons. The whole world soon fell into a period of darkness and darkness. I don't know whether the demons obeyed the oath or disdained the weakness of human beings. Soon, all intelligent creatures except human beings were almost wiped out. And the weak human beings have become the largest race in the world except demons. Seeing that the power of human beings is gradually becoming stronger, the human king wants to drive the demons back to hell to rule the land. However, the demons were so powerful that they destroyed the human kingdom in just one day. Under the leadership of the 12 sages, human beings retreated to the Western world. Seeing that the human world is about to perish, the 12 sages respectively found the magical creatures and intelligent life that injected themselves with blood essence back then, and prayed that they could give more blood from their tribes to mankind, so that mankind can overcome this difficulty. However, things did not follow their wishes. Most of the intelligent life and magical creatures who had been betrayed once rejected the sages. Only some kind intelligent life and magical creatures were willing to help humans. They sacrificed their lives and sacrificed themselves. The blood of the whole body was donated to humans. The 12 sages are well aware of the greed and cruelty hidden in the human soul. If people with evil intentions learn magic, it will be a major blow to human civilization, which is already facing destruction. The 12 sages spend the rest of their lives choosing and cultivating the people they think are right. Time flies. When the last 12 sages passed away, the demons launched a general attack on humans and the remaining intelligent life and magical creatures, trying to wipe out all the original inhabitants of the earth. However, to the surprise of the demons, humans seemed to suddenly become stronger. Ordinary soldiers held enchanted bows and crossbows, and shot the demon soldiers into sieves one after another. Under the leadership of the new 12 sages and thousands of disciples of the first generation of 12 sages, human beings and the remaining magical creatures and intelligent life launched a counterattack against the demons. The war lasted for 10 years, during which many magical creatures and intelligent life were wiped out. Those who were still alive hid in the deep mountains and jungles one after another, and 5 of the 12 sages of the second generation of human beings were killed or injured, and only one of the nearly 1,000 disciples of the first generation of 12 sages was left. There were less than 100 people. They left the human capital and went to the whole world together, eliminated the remaining demons, and restored the world destroyed by the demons. They were stationed all over the world, and gradually circulated their blood. The human king was afraid that wizards would rob him of his right to rule. The human king believed that magic was the source of evil on the grounds that the first generation of 12 sages opened the gate of hell and released demons, destroying the whole world. So soon after the victory of the war, the king mobilized his knights to destroy the remaining wizards. The 12 sages of the second generation, seeing that the king was so greedy for power, gave up hope for human beings and left the human kingdom. And those surviving wizards were massacred by their former comrades in arms for most of the time, and they all retreated to the mountains one after another, hiding their identities. Since then, wizards and muggles have become two worlds. The king ordered that no one should learn magic, or mention that war in those dark days. Anyone who was reported to learn magic, mention magic and that war were all executed by the king. Under the bloody means of the king, people also gradually forgot that period of history, those who fought side by side with them, and how wonderful this world used to be. Day until now. Seeing this, Julian took a deep breath, and then exhaled again. This description is much more terrifying than what he found in the library. No wonder he couldn't find any relevant information in Muggle books and history. Gua played such an ignominious role in this history. Also, it turns out that this is how wizards came to inject the blood essence of magical creatures or intelligent life into human beings, so as to open the way of magic for human beings. Closing the book in his hand, Julian just sat quietly on his bed and thought, thinking for a day. In the early morning of the appointed day, Julian got up very early. He came to the common room and left a note saying, "Self-study today," and went to the underground laboratory to prepare things. A lot of messy potions were refined, all kinds of potions were refined, and then the refined potions were thrown into the alchemy bag that he had prepared before, and then the bag was put in his arms. Julian, who stayed in the potions laboratory for a day, even skipped the only history of magic class today. It was already evening when Julian came to the lobby for dinner again. Good money. Where have you been all day today and what have you been doing? Hermione saw that Julian was the first to ask. My dear girl, I have something very important to do today, please don't bother me, don't worry, I will be fine. Julian said softly, stroking Hermione's head. Hearing Julian's nonsensical words, Hermione obediently shut up. Harry and the others, who were curious about Julian's words and deeds, wanted to ask something, but they were all strongly suppressed by Julian. After dinner, Julian hurriedly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes again, leaving only their worried eyes. Because Julian has been acting so strangely for the past month, wandering between the library and the laboratory all day, and he didn't even go to class today, Julian has become like this since he came back from the Forbidden Forest, which is really weird. Soon the appointed time was coming. Julian turned into a crow with an animagus, and flew towards the depths of the Forbidden Forest against the moonlight. When Julian came to the predetermined location, he found that Julian and the centaur leader were already there. Julian flew down the branch, changed back into human form, and said hello, good evening, Julian, Asilias. Good evening, Lord Julian. Asilias replied respectfully, and Julian nodded. So, have you discussed, where shall we go tonight? Julian asked curiously. Your Excellency Julian, the result of our discussion with the unicorn is that you go to the unicorn tribe first tonight. As for our centaur tribe, you can come back tomorrow. After all, tomorrow night is full too, isn't it? Asilia said. Although I don't understand it very well, why must it be a full moon? Julian asked curiously. Oh, You know, Your Excellency Julian, we centaurs believe in the goddess of the moon, and many secrets of our centaurs will only be revealed under the light of the moon, please forgive me. Axelias replied slightly apologetically Road. It's okay, I don't care. Julian waved his hand and said. Seeing that Julian really didn't care much, Axelias bowed slightly again and said to Julian, then, I'll be waiting for you tomorrow. I wish you all a wonderful night, Your Excellency Julian and you Princess Leanne. After finishing speaking, Axelias turned around and ran towards the forbidden forest behind him, and his figure disappeared in the dark forbidden forest after a while. So, you are still the princess of the unicorn family, should I call you Your Highness the Princess? Julian asked Julian in a slightly teasing tone. You can call it whatever you want. Let's go. We still have a lot to do tonight. Follow me closely, otherwise you will get lost in the forbidden forest. Deep in the forest went. Seeing Julian who left first, Julian hurriedly followed. The road to the unicorn tribe is indeed difficult, not because the road in the forbidden forest is not smooth, but because some kind of magic seems to be cast on this journey. There seems to be a voice in Julian's heart urging Julian to make Julian keep going. He wanted to turn around and walk back, but Julian would have followed the instructions in his heart and turned back if Julian hadn't been by his side reminding him at any time. This place is so evil, why, I always want to turn around and go back, is there some kind of deceptive magic cast on here? Julian asked in disgust. Yes, this can be regarded as a mechanism for us unicorns to protect themselves. According to my father, it was set up by 4 skilled sages long ago to protect us. You also know that our unicorns' beasts are precious to you humans. A long time ago, you humans even launched a large-scale siege against our unicorn family. Many people died at that time, and because of that siege, we moved to the Forbidden Forest. You must know that we unicorns used to live on the grassland. Speaking of this, Julian paused. I'm sorry for everything that humans have done before. Julian said sincerely to Julian. These things have nothing to do with you, and you don't have to take it to heart. If you want to apologize for your ancestors, then I hope you don't refuse my father's words. After that, Julian continued to walk forward. By the way, I've been wanting to ask since just now, what exactly do you want me to do? Both you and Axelias seem to be hiding something from me. You shouldn't just invite me as a guest. Julian asked. I don't know if the centaurs are looking for you, but our unicorns do have something to ask you, but even though we unicorns are asking you, this matter is closely related to you. I will tell you what it is specifically. I won't talk to you anymore, my father will explain it clearly to you when we get to the tribe. Julian replied bluntly. Okay, Julian replied sullenly, and continued to follow Julian towards the unicorn tribe, but he kept thinking about what Julian said just now, and thinking about what the unicorn tribe would look for. What about me, could it be related to Yolanda? Thinking this way, Julian followed Julian and continued walking for half an hour before Julian stopped again and said to Julian, okay, we're here. There was a bush in front of him, and the bush was very thick, so thick that Julian could only see a piece of dark vegetation before Julian's eyes, and then he couldn't see clearly. Julian yelled at the bushes, a faint silver light lit up from Julian's body, the light of the full moon shone on Julian's body, and then 2 silver lights shone towards the bushes. In the silver light under the radiance of the light, the bushes retreated slowly to both sides, and after a while the thick bushes separated a road in front of Julian and Julian. Julian said solemnly, follow me, this is the last obstacle to reach our unicorn tribe. This is a maze, only under the leadership of unicorns can we enter and exit safely, otherwise we will be trapped and die in the labyrinth. After finishing speaking, Julian took the lead and walked towards the entrance of the maze. After hearing Julian's words, Julian hurriedly followed. 1 person and 1 unicorn walked for an hour before they got out of the maze. Is it easier to fly? Julian asked curiously. Flying above the maze is forbidden, whether it is magic, or your wizard's props, such as brooms and flying carpets. Julian explained. Then what happens if you force your way in? Julian asked curiously. Then you will only be trapped to death in the maze. This is still light. If you fly in, you will fall down the moment you enter the maze. The piranhas in the maze are not vegetarians. Leanne said with a little pride. There are piranhas here. Surprised, Julian immediately withdrew his outstretched hand. Okay, Here we are, Julian, welcome to our unicorn's home. Following Julian's words, a very spectacular scene unfolded in front of Julian. Wow, that's spectacular, Julian exclaimed. Unicorns, which are usually very rare, can be seen everywhere here. There are 140 unicorns in groups, and their bodies are glowing with a slight silver light, which looks absolutely beautiful. Even Wu Lian's heart there was also a sense of joy. The soft lawn is extremely comfortable to walk on, and the comfortable Julian wants to roll on the ground. Seeing the arrival of Julian and Julian, the unicorns in front gave way one after another, and lowered their heads to show respect. Following behind Julian, Julian came all the way to a huge tree house. The tree house is really big, so big that Julian even thinks it should be the residence of giants. The door of the tree house is very beautiful, with thin lines on it, and a touch of silver magic power flowing on the lines. It looks so mysterious and mysterious. This door is an exquisite alchemy prop. Although he doesn't know what it does, Julian knows that the value of this door is definitely more than all the property of a pure-blood noble with a deep foundation. Seeing Julian staring at the wooden door in front of her, Julian said, "This is a defensive alchemy product engraved with a magic circle. According to my father, this door can resist the attack of more than 10 dragons. Shock, if the owner doesn't want to open the door, it will never be opened, and this door is made of ancient elves, and now there is no second one in the world, which is invaluable. Not only is it priceless, it is simply the most precious treasure in the world." Julian sighed. "Okay, don't sigh, come in quickly, my father is inside," Julian said. Following Julian into the gate of the treehouse, when passing through the gate, Julian obviously felt that a feeling of being scanned was conveyed to Julian in an instant. As if feeling Julian's strangeness, Julian turned around and said to him, "There is scanning magic on this door. No matter what kind of disguise you use, it will be transformed back to its original form by this door. Then if I'm pretending, will this door have any countermeasures? It won't just test the authenticity of the person passing through the door?" Julian asked curiously. "Of course not. If you are fake, you will be rejected by this door, and then bounced back by the door," Julian said. Then without waiting for Julian's reply, he spoke again, "Father should be in the astrology room on the top of the tree, you can go up by yourself." After all, Julian moved away, and Yinlian also saw the whole picture of the tree house. The entire interior of the tree house is integrated, there is no trace of splicing, even the wardrobe is integrated with the tree house. Wait, wardrobe, why is there a wardrobe here? Julian looked at Julian and wanted to ask something, but found that Julian had gone out at some point, and now only he and the unicorn king he had never met were left in the whole tree house. Helpless, Julian could only walk towards the spiral staircase in the center of the tree house. When Julian was about to climb to the roof of the tree house, a bright light shone on the stairs in an instant. Julian walked up the stairs to the top floor of the study, and Julian's sight widened in an instant. Standing here, Julian can even see the whole maze in the distance. Speaking of which, this 400 bookstore should not be high, but it feels higher than the Hogwarts Tower. Julian raised his head and looked up to the sky, and all of a sudden the stars appeared in front of Julian. The dense stars shine with their own light. Julian feels that the world seems to be quiet in an instant, and Julian's heart seems to be purified in an instant. Just as Julian was quietly watching the starry sky, the stars in the starry sky suddenly lit up with a little silver light, which was softer and more intense than before. Dots of starlight gathered together and shone on Julian's body. Julian's eyes widened, and the silver starlight gradually shone on Julian's eyes. The pupils in Julian's eyes spun unconsciously, the black pupils turned into blood-red three-god jade, and the blood-red three-god jade changed again, turning into a big windmill, but they still didn't stop spinning. Julian only felt a soft and cool power enter into his eyes along the silver starlight. The pupil power consumed by dealing with Voldemort before was gradually replenished. Not only that, Julian felt as if his eyes were covered with something, prevented his pupil power from leaking out. Although I don't know why, my pupil power seems to be locked by the starlight. Although it didn't make Sharingan evolve again, Julian can clearly feel. No matter how AJCI he uses the kaleidoscope Sharingan, he will not consume his pupil power anymore. The curse-like black mist that resided in his eyes and his own perception, all disappeared under the light of this starburst. Just as Julian was carefully appreciating the benefits that the starlight brought to him, a slightly calm voice came from Julian's ear. It seems that the very beautiful eyes are the blessing of the starry sky to you. Hearing the sound, Julian quickly lowered his head and looked towards the direction of the sound. It was a very handsome middle-aged man with long silver hair and a crown made of branches on his head. The man's ears were slightly pointed, the facial features are very handsome, with a gentle smile on his face, just like a legendary elf. Looking at the man in front of him, Julian thought to himself, fortunately, I have little Hermione, otherwise I would have to be bent. Thank you very much for your compliment. The man, who seemed to be able to see through Julian's heart, thanked him gently. Julian scratched his head in embarrassment and said, sorry, my name is Julian Willis. I heard that the Unicorn King wants to see me. Do you know where he is? Julian asked with a little embarrassment. It's the Patriarch, not the King. I'm not qualified to be king. There will always be only one king of the Unicorn clan, and that's the one in your body. The man calmly changed Julian's words, but Sejong didn't expect her own words. What kind of impact will it have on the young little wizard? Hearing what the man said, Julian was taken aback for a moment, then pointed to the man, and said in an incredible voice, You are Julian's father, the king of the Unicorn clan, the Patriarch, but now the Patriarch of the Unicorns can let our foreigners here to be. No, Julian is a real unicorn, then you. Julian was overwhelmed by what he saw. The Patriarch of the Unicorn did not explain to Julian, but watched Julian's performance with relish, as if it was a very interesting thing. Just when Julian fell into infinite entanglement, a clear and sweet voice suddenly came from Julian's side. Idiot, I'm so ignorant, I've lost the face of Her Majesty the Queen. As soon as the voice ended, 10 bursts of soft silver light lit up from Julian's body. The light became more and more intense, and the urge to get the wand for the first time flooded Julian's heart again, and Julian obeyed this instinct and raised the wand in his hand and shouted loudly, Call God to guard. As Julian shouted loudly, the silver light on Julian's body quickly converged towards Julian's wand. After a while, Julian's right hand and wand were wrapped in silver light. After a while, the silver light shot up into the sky and gradually became a lifelike unicorn. It is so beautiful, although it looks the same as other unicorns, looking at it makes Julian feel a holy feeling from it, as if it is a collection of all the beautiful things in this world. The silver unicorn in the sky began to run and sing continuously in the sky just like it appeared for the first time. The unicorns around the tree house saw the silver unicorns in the sky knelt down and lowered their heads, as if paying homage to their master. In the centaur tribe a few kilometers away from the unicorn tribe, when the centaur patriarch saw the silver unicorn in the sky, he slowly lowered his head, as if paying tribute to another king. In Hogwarts, which is farther away from the unicorn tribe, the cry of the unicorn also woke up many little wizards who had fallen asleep. In the Gryffindor male dormitory, Harry looked through the window at the unicorn in the sky. The soaring and chirping unicorn turned around to look at Julian's empty bed. For some reason, Harry decided in his heart that this matter had something to do with Julian. And it was also in Hogwarts, the headmaster's office. Dumbledore looked at the unicorn above the Forbidden Forest in the distance, with complicated eyes flashing in his eyes, then sighed helplessly. Dumbledore walked to the cabinet in the headmaster's office, stretched out his hand. He tapped his magic wand 3 times on the left and right sides of the cabinet, and soon the cabinet was divided into 2 halves, and he retreated towards the 2 sides. Looking at the parted cabinet, Dumbledore seemed to have made up his mind and walked into the parted part of the cabinet, revealing a dark hole. The eyes turned back to the silver unicorn that was having fun with the unicorn tribe in the Forbidden Forest and landed on the top of the study. During the falling process, the silver unicorn continued to transform, and finally turned into a dignified beauty when it fell to the top of the tree roof. Looking at the beautiful woman in front of him, Julian was stunned, and his open mouth never closed. Looking at Julian, who was surprised in front of her, the beauty ignored him, but turned around, pulled up the unicorn patriarch who was still kneeling on the ground, and said softly, Long time no see. You have worked hard all these years, Elliot. Hearing the beauty's words, Elliot, the patriarch of the unicorn, said with reddened eyes and trembling, Everything is sheltered by the starlight, may the starlight shine on the unicorn forever. May the stars shine on the unicorn forever. The beauty replied and turned to look at Julian, who was still sluggish. The beauty smiled and said, why don't you recognize me? Looking at the woman in front of him, Julian couldn't believe it and said, Yolanda. You're Yolanda, Julian said in surprise, and after speaking, Julian turned his gaze to Elliot, and then Julian's gaze switched back and forth between the two. Finally Julian said, magic, or instinct. It's magic, similar to your human animagus, which can transform our magical creatures into human form. Yolanda looked at Julian approvingly and said, okay, I don't care if it's an animagus or not. Since you're here, tell the unicorn patriarch what you need. Otherwise, it's easy to cause misunderstandings if I open my mouth. Julian turned to Yolanda said. And Yolanda's eyes turned to Elliot, the patriarch of the unicorns. Elliot understood and said to Julian, Your Excellency Julian, please follow me, everything is ready. After that, Elliot took the lead and walked down the ancient tree house. Looking at Elliot who was walking towards the tree house, Julian looked at Yolanda suspiciously and asked, What are you preparing for? What is ready? What is Elliot talking about, Yolanda? You will know if you follow the past and have a look. Let's go, Yolanda said casually. With a trace of uneasiness in his heart, Julian followed Elliot to the bottom of the tree house. Follower Elliot walked all the way to the depths of the unicorn tribe. When Julian arrived at the destination, Julian was shocked by the sight again. What stood in front of Julian was a huge altar. The style of the altar is simple and majestic. The whole altar is built with unknown materials, but it actually reflects the entire starry sky. From a distance, it looks like 10 pieces of starry sky have fallen to the ground. On the altar are 4 unicorns that have transformed into human shapes like Elliot. At this time, the 4 of them are standing on the 4 corners of the altar with solemn expressions, their hands and fingers interlaced in front of their chests, and they are chanting unknown words. The incantation of the 4 people, every time the 4 of them recited a sentence, the starlight on the altar would brighten up. It was not until the 4 of them finished chanting the incantation that Julian was amazed. All the starlight on the altar gathered in the center of the altar, like a dazzling star. The star didn't exist for a long time, and the starlight shone towards a huge stone frame facing Julian, forming a layer of silver light curtain on the stone frame. At this time, Yolanda spoke, Our unicorn family has believed in the goddess of starlight for generations. This starry sky altar was given to us by the starry sky goddess. We unicorns can open the starry sky altar on the full moon day of each month, but we generally don't open the starry sky altar at random. The last time I opened the starry sky altar was before my entity died. When I personally put the starry sky gem into the starry sky secret realm opened by the starry sky altar, Julian, I hope you can help me. The star gem was taken out from the secret realm. After all, Yolanda turned her gaze to Julian and looked at Julian with a slightly pleading gaze. Looking at Yolanda who was looking at him, Julian asked puzzled, Since you went in once before, why can't you go in again? Besides, you put the things there, so it's easier for you to find some. No, I can't get in. Each unicorn can only enter the secret realm of the starry sky once. I've already been in it once, so I can't go in again. Most importantly, I'm almost dead. Now I am a remnant soul. Even if I go in, I can't do anything. Please Julian, the star gem is very important to our unicorn family. After all, Yolanda bowed his head to Julian. Elliot he knelt down on one knee with the other 4 priests and looked at Julian. Seeing the reactions of the 6 people, Julian said speechlessly, You are forcing me. If I don't go, your unicorns will perish. It is impossible to perish, but in the following prophecy, our unicorn family will not be able to play the role we should play. Yolanda said. Prophecy? What prophecy? Julian asked curiously. You will know this when you come out of the secret realm. Yolanda replied. Looking at the 5 Elliot still kneeling in front of him, and Yolanda still leaning against his head, Julian fell silent. I'll go, you're a bundled sail. Forget it, I'll go. Can't I go? But at least tell me where the gem is, otherwise how can I find it? Leon said in a self-defeating manner as if giving up. I don't need to tell you the location. You will know when you go in. Everything is in the starry sky. Yolanda said meaningfully. Seeing Yolanda who didn't want to say anything more, Julian walked helplessly towards the silver-lighted arch. Standing in front of the arch, Julian sighed helplessly and stepped towards the light curtain. Seeing Julian walking into the light curtain, Yolanda let out a long breath. Elliot smiled wryly at the side and said, I hope that when Lord Julian comes out of the secret realm, he won't hold grudges against the entire unicorn family because of this. After that, Elliot also turned his gaze to the light curtain. This is his fate, and no one can change it. Since he came to this world, it has been destined. I hope he can support the entire prophecy. Kong Shinkong protects you, Lycan. After all, Yolanda interlaced her hands and fingers like the 4 priests before and raised them to her chest to pray for Julian. As for Julian, Julian seems to be in a strange space at this time, with silver light everywhere, and Julian himself keeps falling. Julian wants to stop falling, but unfortunately, he couldn't move at all. After falling for an unknown amount of time, Julian's feet finally touched the ground. When Julian opened his eyes and looked around, Julian found that he was standing on a grassland. The grassland is so wide that you can't see the edge at a glance, and the grassland is not empty. There are groups of people on the grassland. The beautiful unicorns shuttle back and forth on the grassland, appearing so free and unrestrained. As if attracted by the beautiful scenery in front of him, Julian looked at the grassland and unicorns in front of him. When Julian was intoxicated by the beautiful scenery, a voice suddenly came from behind Julian. The voice was very soft, but the soft voice was full of anxiety. I beg you, Yolanda, please save mankind. Without your help, this world will face destruction. I know that mankind is sorry for you unicorns, but you know the current situation. If we don't unite, if you stand up, you will not be able to defeat those demons. Yolanda, demon. Julian turned his gaze to the direction the voice came from when he heard these 2 words. Julian turned his gaze and saw 2 women standing there not far from him, and it was evident that the words just now were spoken by one of them. Daisy, what you humans are sorry for is not only our unicorn family, but all the magical creatures and intelligent life in this world who have been hurt by your human greed. We use the blood essence of our own people to help you open the magic, and how did you repay us? By opening the gates of hell and releasing those evil demons to slaughter us. Daisy, you know, even we unicorns don't want to suffer again betrayed. The young Yolanda said resolutely. But, the person named Dai Qian obviously wanted to say something, but was stopped by Yolanda. Daisy, as I said, we unicorns don't want to be betrayed a second time. You go back. As for humans, wouldn't it be a good thing for us to see this despicable race disappear? Yolanda said in a slightly contemptuous tone. Yolanda, Daisy was obviously shocked by Yolanda's tone and content, and wanted to say something. But Daisy was stopped by Yolanda again, and Yolanda said, if Daisy is a friend, I welcome you, but if you are a human lobbyist, then I'm sorry, someone will see you off. Yolanda, no race can live alone. Even you unicorns, Yolanda, you are bringing unicorns into darkness, Yolanda. The woman named Daisy shouted. He was taken away by 2 unicorns who took human form. At this point this picture is over. The ending scene quickly turned into a little bit of silver light, and Julian was falling for the second time, but before falling, I don't know if it was an illusion, because Julian found that Yolanda seemed to be looking at him. This time the fall was very short, and after a while Julian stepped on the ground again. This time, Julian appeared outside a simple tent. The tent was lit with lights, and many strange shadows shone on the tent wall. Just when Julian was about to leave here to find if there was anyone, a rough voice suddenly came from inside the tent. I disagree. We have helped humans so much, but what do humans give us back? Only blood and betrayal. Greedy humans will summon demons from hell for the sake of power and territory. Humans are asking for trouble. Why are we responsible for human mistakes? Hearing this voice, Julian came to the door of the tent, hesitated for a while, and then opened the door of the tent. The inside of the tent is huge, at least 100 times bigger than what you see from the outside. There are not luxurious decorations inside the tent, but it looks like it gave Julian a majestic feeling. It is strange that a tent actually gave Julian a feeling of grandeur. A majestic feeling. Just before Julian finished admiring the decorations in the tent, suddenly that rough voice came again, but what he said made Julian break out in a cold sweat. That human boy, why are you here? Do you know where this is? Hearing the sound, Julian turned his gaze to the source of the sound, the center of the tent, and the 12 people who were in a meeting in the middle of the tent all looked at him. Julian looked at the 12 people sitting around the round table in surprise and said, "Can you see me?" "Nonsense. Did you use some kind of concealment magic?" In my eyes, you broke into our 12 kings meetings so openly. Who the hell are you, kid? Who sent you here? Isn't that despicable, the human king, huh? The burly man questioned Julian. Hearing this, Julian's cold sweat immediately came down. So scared, Julian could feel the 12 people in front of him. Each of them had a huge magic power reaction. Even Dumbledore's huge magic power was not as good as the 12 people here. 1/10 of any one person. Julian had to sigh that everyone here is a big boss. Just when Julian was about to say something, a familiar voice sounded. I remember you, human being. When Dai Qian came to look for me, you seemed to be there, but disappeared soon. But you have a very pure and familiar smell, said the owner of the voice. It was Yolanda. Looking at Yolanda in front of him, Julian immediately said, Yolanda, it's me, Julian, don't you know me? Hearing Julian's words, one of the 12 people asked Yolanda, Unicorn King, what's going on? Why does this human being know you? Did you help human beings without the permission of the Council of 12 Kings? Giant Eagle King, don't be so arbitrary. I didn't help humans. The last time Dai Qian came to me, I was coaxed away. As for this human, I don't know what's going on. Why don't we ask him? Yolanda replied gracefully. After finishing speaking, Yolanda turned her head to Julian and said gently, Child, don't be nervous, I can feel the unicorn blood in your body. Since you have unicorn blood in your body, then you must be a pure good man. Come and tell me, why do you know my name, and who are you? Looking at Yolanda, Julian asked cautiously, Are you sure you want me to say it? Yolanda nodded, motioning for Julian to say yes. Seeing Yolanda nodding, Julian said, Well, I'm also confused. In fact, you asked me to come. The future you asked me to come. At that time, you were already dead. There is only a strand of remnant soul left. Having said this, Julian stopped and looked at Yolanda. However, Yolanda didn't have any big reaction and still smiled, beckoning Julian to continue talking. Looking at Yolanda's reaction, Julian continued, At that time, it seemed that my magic wand contained a drop of your blood essence, and getting that magic wand awakened your blood hidden in my body, so all your blood, the wisps of remnant souls, came to life. In the next hour, Julian told all the ins and outs of the incident, how he saved Julian, how he was brought to the unicorn tribe, and how he entered the secret realm of the starry sky. After hearing Julian's narration, all 12 kings including Yolanda fell silent. After a long time, Yolanda said, You said you were once blessed by the starry sky, didn't you? Can you show me the evidence of your being blessed? Hearing Yolanda's words, Julian nodded and opened his kaleidoscope Sharingan. The moment I saw Julian's eyes, the 12 kings were all stunned zero. Looking into Julian's eyes, Yolanda said in amazement, Yes, this is indeed a blessing from the starry sky. I have to say, Julian, your eyes are very beautiful. Pretty. Julian was taken aback, remembering that Elliot said the same thing after being blessed by the starry sky, but he didn't take it to heart at the time, thinking that Elliot was just talking about the scene. After all, what kind of Sharingan is he? I still have some points. Even the most enlightened people will not think that their blood-red eyes are a good symbol. Did his eyes change after being blessed? Julian reached out to touch his eyes, and Julian was eager to see what his eyes looked like now. Seeing Julian's reaction, Yolanda smiled gently and said softly, After being blessed by the starry sky, you haven't looked into your own eyes yet, have you? After all, Yolanda waved his hand without waiting for Julian's response, and a transparent water ball appeared in front of Julian in an instant. Looking at himself in the water mass, Julian was stunned. Is this still his kaleidoscope Sharingan? Reflected in the water are two eyes that look like shrunken starry sky. The two windmill-shaped pupils in the eyes are still there, but they have faded. The original black windmills have become milky white, and the original scarlet whites have become white. At this time, Julian's two eyes are like two shrinking starry sky, so deep, so wonderful, so charming. Looking at his own eyes in the water, Julian thought to himself, since he has got rid of the curse of the Uchiha family, he can no longer be called riding wheel eyes. Julian looked at his eyes. Since they are blessed by the stars, then let's call it the astral eye. Looking at Julian, who was engrossed in her own eyes, Yolanda smiled and woke Julian up. Okay, those are your eyes, don't look at them now, let's talk about business. You said they are from the future, and I asked you to look for the starry sky gem, right? Yeah, Julian nodded in affirmation after recovering. But the starry sky gem, we still have a lot of use for it now, why don't I give it to you when I run out of it? Yolanda said with difficulty. Ah, so straightforward, aren't you afraid I'm lying to you? Julian asked suspiciously. But Yolanda didn't respond, because the scene was over, and the picture turned into a little silver light again. Julian began to fall again. By the time the broken picture stabilized again, Julian had also appeared in a new place. Compared with the previous two places, the place where it appeared this time is simply hell. Julian looked around, and there were corpses everywhere, including human beings in armor, lions with burnt black and bald fur, white tigers, giant eagles, and those strange demons like those described in Muggle adventure novels. The uneven ground seemed to have been hit by some heavy object, and the black charcoal was constantly emitting black smoke, all of which gave Julian a feeling of gunpowder on the battlefield. This place is clearly a battlefield. What has happened since I left? Julian walked helplessly to one side of the battlefield, hoping to leave this place. At this moment, a familiar voice came over. When I heard the description of the human soldiers, I knew it was you, Julian. Hearing this familiar voice, Julian turned his head quickly. It was Yolanda. Yolanda's eyes were full of exhaustion and weakness. Seeing Yolanda's appearance, Julian took out a bottle of potion from his robe and threw it to Yolanda, saying, "Drink it, it can restore your health, state." After Yolanda drank the potion, Julian asked, "What's the situation now? Seems to be a battlefield." Yolanda did not answer Julian's question, but looked at the potion bottle in his hand and asked happily, "Did you invent this potion?" Looking at the delighted Yolanda in front of him, Julian nodded in confusion, and asked, "I invented it, what's the problem?" "Is there any problem? It's a big problem. Come with me. This is not a place to talk now. Come on." After speaking, Yolanda pulled Julian and walked in one direction. Still in the familiar tent, Yolanda took Julian into the tent and said to the people in the tent, "Look, guys, who's here?" The people in the tent raised their heads when they heard Yolanda's voice, and looked at Yolanda and Julian, who was dragged in. "It's you, human boy, you're here again." It was still that rough voice. "Ah, let's just say, hello, senior." Julian greeted the rough man with a little embarrassment. "Okay, Lion King, now is not the time to reminisce about the past, quickly open the enchantment." After listening to Yolanda's words, the 12 people in the tent quickly dispersed around the tent, and then Julian felt as if a force locked him. "Okay, I don't know how long the enchantment can last, so we can't say for sure how long you can exist. I don't know if you will appear in front of us again after you disappear this time, so now I will briefly, I told you to listen, don't interrupt, at least let you understand your current situation, understand?" Yolanda said in a serious tone. Watching Julian nod his head, Yolanda began to say, "Starry Sky Secret Realm is the treasure bestowed by the Starry Sky Goddess to our unicorn family, and it has many functions. All I know is that it is used to choose the king of the unicorn family, but after you enter the secret realm of the starry sky, you come to the past. I think this should be another ability of the secret realm of the starry sky, traveling through time and space. But this ability is flawed, so you will be unstable every time you appear, and disappear quickly. The enchantment we opened can temporarily block the turbulence of time and space on your body, so your time of existence this time should not be too short. I don't know what time you came, but now is the time of war with the demons. You know, it's been 10 years since the last time you appeared at our 12 Kings meeting, and many things have happened in between. In short, we 12 Kings decided to help humans fight against demons. As for what is the 12 Kings Conference, the 12 Kings Conference is an organization composed of 12 powerful kings of magical creatures, and it is used to make decisions among the various races of magical creatures. I am the Unicorn King. As you know, they are Lion King, Bear King, Eagle King, Tiger King, Snake King, Badger King, Elephant King, Leopard King, Wolf King, Dragon King, Phoenix King. The 12 kings represent 12 races of powerful magical creatures. The 12 sages of your human race were injected with our blood essence into their bodies by our 12 kings, helping them open the door to magic. However, the powerful magic power brought them bad luck. Seeing the powerful magic power of the 12 sages, the greedy human king could not stand the temptation of power, and was lured by the devil. He used the families of the 12 sages as a threat, and ordered the 12 sages to open the gate of the demons and release the demons from hell. Our race of 12 magical creatures was almost wiped out. Since then, we have led our people to leave the central plains and hide in the forests and mountains. It took us 100 years to restore our kind. However, at this moment, the human king was bewitched by something, and decided to attack the demon in an attempt to reseal the demon into the gate of hell. The flames of war resumed, and the human army was slaughtered by demons in less than a day. When you first appeared, Dai Qian, one of the 12 sages of human beings who inherited my blood essence, came to ask me for help. I hope that our unicorn family can help you humans. But it was rejected by me. I don't want to drag my ethnic group into the war again. However, what I didn't expect was that the demons who slaughtered the human army were just a group of demon soldiers. Humans are too weak to face demons, just like rabbits face lions. After the 12 sages of human beings died in battle, the demons invaded the whole world again. The demons dispatched an army and came to our world. The leader of the demon lords is Anser, one of the 3 major demon lords. Helpless, we can only join the war. Now we are battling Anser's demonic army. Our 12 clans suffered heavy casualties, but the demons fought more and more. They poured into our world continuously from the gate of hell. If the gates of hell are not closed for a day, then the devil will never be eradicated for a day. If we can close the gates of hell, the remaining demons will have nothing to fear. Because the demons themselves are not very strong, but at the moment when the gate of hell opened, the breath of the Devil King came to our world with the army of demons. Most of the magic power of most magical creatures. As a result, our magical creatures can't fight with all our strength. Basically we can only rely on hand-to-hand combat. In fact, if we let us fight with real swords and guns, these demons are nothing to fear. Julian, the potion you just gave me the dawn of victory. I can feel that after drinking your potion, the seal on my body is much weaker. Perhaps, your potion may be the key to our victory in the war. Can your medicine be refined on a large scale? Yolanda asked. It's possible, but I don't know if there are any potion ingredients I need in this era. Julian said. It's okay, you can give me the list of medicinal ingredients and the steps of refining the medicine, and I'll take a look. Badger King, a short, fat middle-aged woman who looked very kind, said. Julian obediently handed the list to the Badger King. The Badger King took the list and looked at it carefully, then nodded and said, "Is there a finished product?" Julian quickly took out a bottle of refined potion and handed it to the Badger King. Badger King took the potion, opened the bottle, smelled it and took a tentative sip, then Badger King's eyes lit up and he said in surprise, "It's doable, it's totally doable." After seeing the Badger King's reaction, the Lion King shouted in his rough voice, "Then it's unreliable to produce your medicine by dose, and it's unreliable to fight against humans, but it's okay to let them refine the medicine. With the medicine refined by humans, we the 12 clans may have a first-line chance of winning." That's right, Julian, you really did a great job. Yolanda said happily. Then Yolanda said again with a difficult face, "Starlight Gem, we still have great use now, and we will need to use it to seal the gate of hell in the future. I don't know when you will show up next time, but we are meeting, Julian, put the star gems here first, next time." Before Yolanda finished speaking, the Phoenix King's face changed and he shouted, "No, the barrier can't hold up anymore, the turbulent flow of time is about to break through the barrier." As soon as the Phoenix King finished speaking, there was a sound of broken glass. Julian lost his footing and fell into the endless silver light again, falling continuously. When Julian stood firm again, Julian habitually went to look for Yolanda, and it turned out that Yolanda was not far from him on the hillside. Julian quietly climbed towards the hillside where Yolanda was. After Julian climbed the hillside, he found that Yolanda's gaze was staring straight ahead. Following Yolanda's gaze, Julian saw the door with a strong ominous atmosphere. Seeming to have noticed Julian's arrival, Yolanda said slowly, "Julian, you're here." Yolanda's tone was full of exhaustion and weakness. "Well, here I am, where is Yolanda, what is that door, and how long has it been since I was last here?" Julian asked, handing over a bottle of potion. "This is Ethlandel, the former capital of mankind," Yolanda replied after drinking the potion. "The former capital of mankind?" Julian asked. "Yes, the former capital of mankind. since the greedy human king ordered the first 12 sages to open the gates of hell, this is no longer the capital of mankind. Yolanda's tone was still flat, but I don't know if it was Julian the illusion that Julian felt a little contempt in Yolanda's tone. Looking at the huge black door that exudes ominousness, and the demons under the door, Julian said, now it should become the center of the devil, then, that door must be the gate of hell. That's right, that's the gate of hell. Yolanda turned around to look at Julian after replying to Julian. It's been 10 years since you came last time, and we're about to win. Look at Julian, as long as the remaining demons are wiped out and the gates of hell are sealed, we'll be completely victorious. Yolanda said with a trembling voice sadly. Listening to Yolanda's sad words, Julian fell silent. After a while, Julian said silently, how many people were sacrificed? They're all dead, and now the only 12 kings left are me, the Lion King, the Badger King, the Snake King and the Eagle King, and all other races. Yolanda hadn't finished speaking yet. He couldn't help crying anymore. Looking at the crying woman in front of him, Julian felt sad. This is war. Gently embracing Yolanda's shoulders, Julian patted Yolanda's shoulders and said slowly, cry, it's fine to cry out, you have carried too much, cry. I will deal with the rest, you carried it together. Yolanda just fell on Julian's shoulder and wept loudly. After a long time, Yolanda recovered her emotions and got up from Julian's shoulders with a blushing face. Sorry, I made you laugh. We have wasted a lot of time. Come with me quickly, and I will take you to meet them. Yolanda said eagerly. Yolanda, don't be nervous, I can feel that the so-called power of time is not acting on me. This feeling is just like the last time you opened the enchantment. I want to get it when I really get it. The star gem won't go back to my time. Julian comforted Yolanda. Really, that's really great, let's go, I'll take you to the tent. After that, Yolanda took Julian's hand and walked down the hillside. When he came to the coalition camp again, Julian saw many intelligent life and magical creatures, but most of them were seriously injured, and some even died screaming. Looking at these injured magical creatures, Julian felt a sense of sadness in his heart. These are innocent lives bought for the sake of human greed. When Julian came to the command tent, there were not only the Lion King, but also the king of the remaining magical creatures, as well as the centaur and a few seemingly not weak humans. This is the first time Julian has encountered in this era. The daisy from here is also here. Because of the breath of the Demon King, most of the magic power of most magical creatures has been sealed, so the frontal battlefield has always been dominated by the centaur, relying on the powerful melee combat ability of the centaur and the recovery potion provided by Julian. The coalition forces only carelessly drove the demons to the vicinity of the gate of hell. Watching Julian come in, the Lion King's rough voice sounded first. Human boy, is it a coincidence that you come here every time? Why do you always attack in the end? Why don't you come to join in the fun, ha 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 ha? Looking at the majestic Lion King despite being blind in one eye, Julian said with a smile, it's finally going to attack, of course I want to join in the fun, Senior Lion King. You must be the legendary Julian who provided recovery potions for the coalition forces. I am Byron, the great general of Rohan. He is a real hero. The centaur in the tent said respectfully to Julian. Seeing the centaur general bowing to him, Julian hurried forward to support Byron and said, I dare not take your thanks, you and your centaur soldiers, as well as all the soldiers who fought on the battlefield, true heroes, true warriors. After Julian finished speaking, he drew out his wand and gave a very advanced wizard salute to everyone in the tent. Looking at Julian who was saluting, Yolanda stepped forward, supported Julian and said, you don't need Julian who is saluting, after all, the current war is the responsibility of our generation, isn't it? Yolanda said, and then Yolanda turned his gaze to the wand in Julian's hand, and asked, is this the prop used to cast spells in the future? Julian nodded, then handed Yolanda his wand. Yolanda took the wand that Julian handed over, put it in her hand and observed it carefully. After observing for a while, Yolanda said, that's right, it does contain my blood essence, I can feel it, but the person who made this magic wand is really powerful, he almost killed me. All the magic power in the blood essence is attached to this branch, it is my blood essence and this branch that complement each other, it is really remarkable, no wonder it can open the hidden unicorn blood in your blood. Daisy, come and see this little guy, maybe this little guy is your descendant. Yolanda waved to a woman among several humans. After listening to Yolanda's words, Dai Qian walked over here. Looking at Julian, who was only as tall as her own chest, Dai Qian saluted slightly. Although Yolanda said that you are my descendant, I still want to thank you for your contribution to the coalition forces. Thank you. Seeing that Dai Qian, who was so much taller than him, bowed down to thank him, Julian hurried forward to help Dai Qian. Looking at the two people who were polite to each other, Yolanda said with a smile, "Okay, you two, don't pinch like this. By the way, Lion King," Julian said that he feels that he has no time constraints on him. It seems that Julian can stay here for a few more days. Julian, you can stay here, good kings, during this time. What do you need to talk to people outside? Said, when the general offensive starts tomorrow, we may not be able to take care of you. If you see that the situation is not good, you should withdraw quickly, don't hesitate, you know. Yolanda said seriously. Looking at the nervous Yolanda in front of him, Julian smiled and comforted, don't worry about Yolanda, don't look at me, but I'm very powerful. HMPH, how powerful are you? Just your little magic power is not enough to put people's teeth in. You'd better stay here, the Lion King said contemptuously. Hey, you still don't believe me, right? Let's see the truth on the battlefield tomorrow. After speaking, Julian ignored the crowd and went out to help the wounded. Looking at Julian, who walked out of the handsome tent, Yolanda said, I sent him here in the future, so I must send him back to the future safely, for sure. Then Yolanda turned around and said seriously to everyone in the tent, hurry up and discuss tomorrow's general attack. This time it's really all or nothing. This is our last chance. At night, Julian sat by the fire by himself and fiddled with the fire with branches, looking up at the starry sky with his head up and his eyes wide open. Strength. Just when Julian was staring at the starry sky with his own eyes, a voice suddenly rang out, Good evening, are you still awake, Julian? Julian turned his attention to the owner of the voice. The person who came was Phoenix, one of the 12 sages of the second generation, the space sage. What a pair of beautiful eyes! Phoenix exclaimed. Hello, Senior Phoenix, Julian replied politely. Can I sit here? You are welcome. After speaking, Julian continued to turn his gaze to the starry sky and continued to absorb the power of the starry sky. Absorb the power of the starry sky. Well, the way Yolanda told me, the decisive battle is going to be tomorrow, isn't it? I have to do my best. Actually, you don't have to, Julian, you're still a kid, aren't you? No, Mr. Phoenix, in front of the demons, they don't care whether you are a child or not. Whether you are a man, a woman, an old man, or a child, they are all the same in their eyes. Therefore, Mr. Phoenix, in front of war, there are no children. Julian said with a firm tone. As if shocked by Julian's words, Phoenix opened his mouth halfway, watching Julian for a long time without closing it. After a long time, Phoenix smiled bitterly and said, It's really a sharp statement, Julian, promise me not to say this sentence in front of other people again, it will bring you disaster. What does the people here refer to? My words will tear up the fig leaf of them, right? Julian said meaningfully. Phoenix continued with a wry smile and said, Yes, your remarks will remove their last fig leaf and put those moths in the sun. Stop talking about such disappointing things. Come on, Julian, have a good chat, tell me what the future world will be like, how many years from the future will you come back, I am very curious. Phoenix, as full of interest, asked. The future world, the time I came was 1991, but I can hardly find any records about this war, so I can't calculate how many years have passed since 1991, but judging from the history of a big country in the East, for at least 5,000 years, there has not been a similar major war. Although there were wars, they were all fighting between Muggles and had little to do with the wizarding world. Julian slowly narrated. Wait, what are you talking about Muggles and wizards? Phoenix asked curiously. Well, the wizarding world is the world of wizards. In my future, magic education has been perfected. There are wizards all over the world, and there are academies that teach magic all over the world. Like me, I am Hog students of Watt's School of Witchcraft and Magic, Julian wanted to say something, but Phoenix stopped him. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, are you sure it is Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry? Phoenix bites the name of Hogwarts very strongly. That's right, It's Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Yes, although I don't love my school that much, but I'm sure it's Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Yes, I'm sure. Julian said confidently. Oh, well, ha ha ha, wait a minute, ha ha ha, wait a minute, Electrolux, ha ha ha, come quickly, Electrolux, come quickly, come quickly. Phoenix couldn't breathe while laughing while panting and shouting. Seeing Phoenix in front of him who seemed to be suffering from epilepsy, Julian asked in confusion, Mr. Phoenix, what are you laughing at, and what does this matter have to do with Mr. Electrolux? Wait a minute, you'll know later, Electrolux, come quickly. Phoenix still shouted. It's so noisy, Phoenix, there will be a big fight tomorrow, don't you want to rest? Then an elegant and angry voice came over. Julian turned his head and looked at the place where the sound came from. An elegant young man and several other young men who were also awakened by Phoenix came towards them. When they walked together, Electrolux stood out. He is like a nobleman who specializes in etiquette. Well, he is a nobleman. Those who came with Electrolux were the rest of the second generation of the 12 sages, and by the way, so did Electrolux. It's so noisy, Phoenix, what's the matter with you? If you don't tell the reason, I will throw you into my snake pit, to enjoy the feeling of 10,000 snakes eating your heart. Electrolux was angry said. Wait, don't get excited about Electrolux, you'll know when I'm done, come to Electrolux and tell Julian your full name. Phoenix looked at Electrolux with a honeyed and happy expression. Said. Although he didn't understand what was going on with his friend, Electrolux still turned his body to Julian, performed a seemingly ancient and noble manner, and said gracefully, Listen, Julian, his full name is Electrolux Ravel Hogwarts Slytherin. Julian didn't react when he heard the first half of Electrolux's full name, but when the second half of Hogwarts and Slytherin came out, Julian was stunned. Looking at Julian with half-opened mouth in front of him, Phoenix felt a sense of relief in his heart. Who told you to look at me just now? Looking at the laughing friends and the surprised Julian, the remaining 12 sages of the second generation showed puzzled expressions on their faces, especially Electrolux, looking at Phoenix who laughed like a fool. Electrolux, his face was as black as charred charcoal in a fire. That's enough, Phoenix, if you call me here just to laugh at my name, then your goal has been achieved. Electrolux said angrily. Looking at the angry friends and other friends with puzzled faces, Phoenix suppressed a smile and said to Julian, Come on, Julian, tell me the name of your school. Nodding, Julian said in a slightly awkward tone, The school I attend has 4 houses, namely, Gryffindor representing courage, Ravenclaw representing wisdom, Hufflepuff representing loyalty, and Slytherin representing pure blood. Together the schools form the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. After listening to Julian's explanation, except for Electrolux and the 3 young people in the crowd, everyone else fell silent at first, and then, like Phoenix, laughed like pigs. Looking at the crowd laughing together, the 4 people headed by Electrolux left this place of right and wrong one after another, and walked towards their own tent. Although the 4 of them looked extremely ashamed, no one knew what they were thinking. After everyone had laughed enough, they all returned to their tents. After all, there was going to be a big battle tomorrow, so a good rest was the most important thing. Looking at the people who had returned to their respective tents, Julian glanced aside and looked at Phoenix who had already laughed to the ground, feeling speechless in his heart, saying that you were one of the 12 sages, with a noble status and a respected status, so like a little is it really okay to roll on the ground like a child? If the coalition forces see it, they will lose hope of victory. After rolling on the ground, Phoenix stood up and patted the dirt on his body, then sat down by the fire again. Turning his head to Julian, he said, Julian, keep talking, you haven't told me what a muggle is. Glancing at the curious Phoenix, Julian took out his wand, pointed at Phoenix and read, Clean up. An invisible magic power instantly swept towards Phoenix, cleaning up all the dirt on Phoenix's body to the ground. Wow, is this the magic of the future? Very convenient magic, thanks Julian. Phoenix said to Julian with a smile. Looking at Phoenix in front of him, Julian said bluntly, I don't want to talk to a dirty ghost by candlelight. Just tonight, Phoenix's status in Julian's heart has dropped from respect to dislike. Looking at the smiling Phoenix, Julian sighed helplessly and said, Muggles refer to ordinary people who don't know how to use magic, because they ignore magic and wizards. Ignore the existence of magic, so we call them Muggles. Phoenix frowned and said, "That's not a good name." After speaking, he loosened his eyebrows and continued to smile and said to Julian, "But that will be thousands or even 10,000 years later." Looking at the phoenix in front of him, Julian held his forehead weakly and sighed, "For such a sage, is it really okay for tomorrow's decisive battle?" Suddenly, he is full of despair for the future. Chapter 71. The next day, Julian slept soundly, and by the time he got out of the tent, the entire camp was almost empty except for a few wounded soldiers. Julian acted cleverly and rushed out of the camp quickly. The camp was huge, and when Julian was about to rush to the gate of the camp, he could already vaguely hear the shouts of killing. Just when Julian was about to rush out of the camp, suddenly two huge shadows blocked the exit of the camp and Julian's way. Julian looked up, and it turned out that there were two remaining members of the giant elephant clan blocking the road. Julian raised his head and shouted at the giant elephant, "What are you doing? I'm going to support the battlefield." But the two giant elephants didn't seem to hear it, their huge bodies remained motionless. Looking at the immobile giant elephant, Julian ran towards the gap under the giant elephant's belly. However, before Julian could run over, the two giant statues were lying on the ground, leaving no room for Julian. The gates of the entire camp were now completely blocked. Looking at the giant elephant, which is nearly 20 meters high even if it is lying down, Julian has nothing to do. Just when Julian was at a loss, a voice came from behind Julian. It was a human general. "Give up, little brat, you don't even look at your weight, it's useless for you to go to the battlefield, why don't you sit comfortably and wait for the victory of the war? Besides, even if we lose, it's better to run from the back door of transporting food and grass, right? War is the business of those magical beasts. We humans only need to sit back and enjoy the achievements. Why are you so persistent? Anyway, even the king has run away. Who knows how good you are? Well, who can give you rewards? There are no rewards and rewards, only fools go to the battlefield to work hard." Hiccup. The human general hiccuped after finishing speaking. Looking at the drunk human general in front of him, Julian suddenly felt an emotion burning in his heart, an emotion called anger burning. Julian punched the drunken human general in the face, and said fiercely, "It is because of mobs like you that humans are looked down upon." Ignoring the human general who was knocked to the ground by him, Julian ran towards the back of the camp. Looking at Julian who ran away, the drunken appearance of the human general disappeared immediately, replaced by a lean and gloomy appearance, just like a demon. Julian ran to the back of the camp. Sure enough, there was a small door for transporting grain and grass. Julian got out through the small door. After about a quarter of an hour, Julian finally passed the gate of the camp, and then ran towards the direction of the screaming. The human general standing on the watchtower looked at Julian who was running towards the battlefield, curled his mouth, and said treacherously to his lieutenant general, "I will implement the plan when the time is right." The lieutenant hesitated for a while and said, "Does the general really want to do this? Will it be too much if we do this?" The lieutenant stopped halfway. After hearing what the lieutenant general said, the human general asked forcefully, "What's the matter, Lieutenant General? You need to know that we did this for the king and for all mankind. Do you know that as long as this thing is done well, you will know the king's reward of?" After hearing the general's words, the last hesitation on the lieutenant's face disappeared, he nodded his head, and went down to carry out the order. And Julian obviously didn't know that when he was rushing to the battlefield, there was a huge conspiracy brewing in his rear. When Julian climbed up the hillside, the scene in front of him obviously shocked Julian a lot. The fighting between various creatures, roaring, howling, and mourning all came together to Julian's ears and the sight before his eyes. The tragic scene shocked Julian for a moment. The gate of hell was temporarily sealed by a silver light curtain, and the demons behind the gate could no longer enter this world. Looking at the past from the hillside, the remaining 5 kings of the 12 kings and the second generation of the 12 sages are doing something in front of the gate of hell with unknown gems, and behind them are only half the number of demons. The coalition forces are fighting hard, trying to resist the attack of the demon army and gain time for the 5 masters and the second generation 12 sages behind them to seal the gate of hell. Looking at the coalition soldiers who fell under the claws of the demon one after another, and the giant dragon struggling to get up under the pressure of countless demons, the grief and anger in Julian's heart broke through his reason like a volcanic eruption. With a roar, Julian rushed down the hillside, Julian's eyes turned quickly, and the blue starry sky appeared above Julian's eyes. The battlefield that was originally shrouded in gunpowder smoke quickly became dark, and a little bit of starlight appeared above the dim battlefield, and the stars shone brightly. As if sensing something, Yolanda, who was sealing the gate of hell, raised his head and looked at the sky above his head. Looking at the bright starry sky above his head, Yolanda sighed sadly, then his eyes turned red, and a tear actually fell down. Looking at the starry sky above his head, Yolanda quickly suppressed the grief in his heart, and then put his attention turned to the seal of the gate of hell. As the starry sky became brighter, the demons and coalition forces on the battlefield raised their heads and looked towards the sky. The surviving demon lord, Sparta, the Fear Lord, also noticed the changes in the sky above his head, and it shouted loudly, because it could feel the power brewing in the starry sky above its head. It was so terrifying, it was called fear itself. It brings great fear. Not long after, when the starlight in the starry sky reached its peak, the soft starlight seemed to shoot down from the starry sky like a sharp arrow. The demons who were shot fell to the ground and howled, while the coalition forces who were shot were shocked by the starlight. The package gradually recovered from the injuries on his body. The rain of arrows only persisted for 10 seconds, but these 10 seconds brought about an earth-shaking change in the situation on the battlefield. The injuries and physical strength of the soldiers belonging to the coalition army have almost recovered, while the demons shot by the starlight turned into ashes one after another. Originally twice as many as the mainland coalition army, only half of the demon army was burned by the starlight, which is the same as the current mainland coalition army. Seeing such a scene, the morale of the Continental Allied forces was boosted, and they charged the demon army one after another. Because of the rain of arrows in the starry sky, the 5 kings and the second generation 12 sages who sealed the gate of hell have recovered their magic power and physical strength one after another, especially Yolanda, whose magic power even broke through her own peak, reaching a level higher than her own. The Lion King and others are at a higher level, and because of Yolanda's breakthrough, the sealing speed of the gate of hell has also been greatly accelerated. And Julian, who caused such an advantage, knelt down on the downhill, lowered his head, blood was continuously flowing out of his eyes, and the originally bright eyes of the starry sky were now dimmed. Just when Julian was down, a human team of about 100 people passed by Julian quietly. Enchant weapons. When passing Julian, the leader of the centurion saluted Julian with the highest etiquette of a human soldier, which is only used when meeting the king. After saluting, the commander led the team and ran towards the battlefield. The elite 100-man squad quickly rushed to the battlefield, behind the demon army. However, what is surprising is that the demon army did not attack this team, but gave way to this human team one after another. The 100-man team kept going, until the Fear Lord Sparta was in front of him. Sparta looked at the 100-man team in front of him, a trace of fear flashed across his eyes, and then Sparta said, "Human, what does your king mean?" The leader of the 100-man team said, "Our Majesty the King, I agree with your proposal, Lord Sparta, but we will sign a contract today to ensure that you will not go back on your word." Sparta replied without hesitation, "Of course, if you don't say it, I will ask for it. You humans are not very reliable." After all, Sparta bit off his left hand and made a contract with the leader of the 100-man squad. "The contract is established, I hope you can keep your promise." After finishing speaking, the leader of the 100-man squad turned around and led his team to leave here, as if they had never appeared before. Sparta looked at the leaving team of 100 people and pondered for a while, then said to his captain of the Devil's Guards, "Spack, more than 10 children and the guards left with me from this place." The captain of the guards nodded without hesitation, and gathered the guards to follow Sparta and quietly left the battlefield. As for their whereabouts, apart from the commander of the 100-man team and Sparta, only the human king knew. When Julian woke up again, Yolanda, who was standing by, handed him a glass of water and helped him up. Looking at the wooden structures around him, Julian touched his sore eyes and asked weakly, "Yolanda, what time is it, and where am I now?" "You have been in a coma for 5 days. Now is the 5th day after the war. This is the holy place of our unicorn family. The Starry Sky Altar and Starry Sky Secret Realm are nearby," Yolanda said with a sigh. "What's the matter, Yolanda, didn't we win? Why is your tone full of sadness?" Julian asked. "That's right, we won, but we won miserably. In order to seal the gate of hell, all the remaining 5 kings died except me. Only 5 of the 12 sages of the second generation of human beings are left. The coalition forces are less than 1/10 of what they were before the war. Although we successfully sealed the gates of hell, the future of our magical creatures has been wiped out by this battle. Even the centaurs suffered heavy losses this time, so this world will be your human world from now on. Yolanda said with a sigh. There is one more thing, Julian, you have to be mentally prepared. Having said this, Ubandi stopped talking. Looking at Yolanda, who was hesitant to speak, Julian asked curiously, "What's the matter, Yolanda? If you say something like that, you will be beaten halfway, do you know that?" After slapping Julian on the head, Yolanda scolded with a smile and said, "You tell me who dares to hit me, ah, who do you say dares to hit me, ah?" Protecting his head with his hands, Julian said with a smile, "That's right, the battle is over, why are you still sour, you should be happy now, right?" Looking at Julian smiling at her, Yolanda felt a pain in her heart, and said, "Julian, the starry sky secret technique you used on the battlefield should have been performed by guiding the power of the starry sky with your eyes as the medium. But because your physical fitness is too weak, and your magic power is too little, so. Looking at Yolanda, who has been, for a long time without a, result, Julian asked flatly, "So what, Indangda?" Looking at the calm Julian, Yolanda said sadly, "So you can cast that spell successfully only if you sacrifice your starry sky eye." Julian said flatly, "You mean, my astral eyes are gone?" Looking at Julian, whose tone was still calm, Yolanda said hastily, "No, it can't be said that it is gone, but it has been temporarily sealed. Now your starry sky eye only has the function of absorbing the power of the starry sky." Julian was silent for a while and then said, "Then can my eyes still be able to use the abilities they had before they were blessed by the starry sky?" "I don't know," Yolanda replied weakly, shaking her head. There was a moment of calm in the room, and after a while Julian said with a smile, "Don't be sad about Yolanda, it's not a big deal, is it? It has been doubled, and now I can still use the power of the starry sky, which is already a great achievement for me, so I am already very satisfied." After that, Julian patted Yolanda's hand to signal Yolanda not to be sad. But Yolanda obviously wanted to say something, but Julian stopped her. "Okay, Yolanda, it's nothing more," I said, "these eyes are enough for me now, okay, let's just let this matter go, don't say any more, go, Yolanda, I have been lying on the bed for 5 days, and my body is rusted. If I do not move, I will almost rust to death." After hearing Julian's words, Yolanda smiled and went to support Julian. After Julian stood up, Yolanda followed Julian and walked out of the house. It was night and the starry sky was shining. Yolanda helped Julian take a walk in front of the tree house. Suddenly Julian asked, "Yolanda, now that the war is over and the gates of hell have been sealed, can you give me the starry sky gem? I think I've been out for so long, and you in the future should be very anxious." Instead of answering Julian's question, Yolanda asked, "In the future, will the two of us have a good relationship?" "What, Yolanda, what did you just say?" As if he didn't understand Yolanda's question, Julian asked in surprise. However, Yolanda did not answer Julian's question but said flatly, "Well, the starry sky gem has fulfilled its mission here, and I will give it to you tomorrow." After hearing Yolanda's words, Julian waved his hand excitedly and cheered, "It's great, I can finally get out of here." Looking at the excited Julian, Yolanda questioned Julian with some displeasure, "Why, in our age, is it so that you don't want to stay here?" Looking at Yolanda, who suddenly changed his face, Julian was a little puzzled, but he hurriedly explained, "No, of course it's not, Yolanda, why do you think so? This era is beautiful, and the air is very fresh, but Yolanda is not my era after all, isn't it? The future is my era." Hearing Julian's answer, Yolanda's eyes flashed with reluctance, and then she let go of Julian's arm and said to Julian, "I will send you the starry sky gem tomorrow, so you can rest well tonight." After all, Yulong left here without looking back and walked towards the depths of the unicorn sanctuary. Julian watched Yolanda leave without knowing why, then raised his head and looked at the starry sky. After a while, the power from the stars relieved the soreness in Julian's eyes. Julian felt that his eyes seemed to have returned to their peak, but Julian could clearly feel that something seemed to be covered in his eyes, which made him unable to use the secret art of astral eyes, but fortunately, the ability possessed by Kaleidoscope Sharingan seems to be still there, but part of it was sealed due to the forced use of secret techniques. Julian can feel that the only one who can use his star eye now is the weakened Susano, and the ability to absorb the power of the starry sky. Slowly returning to the tree house, Julian lay on the bed, recalling his experience since he entered the secret realm of the starry sky, and after thinking about it, he fell into a drowsy sleep again. It was dusk of the next day when Julian woke up again. He shook his heavy head to wake himself up, and then got out of bed. Pushing open the door, Julian was caught by the afterglow of the setting sun, and subconsciously blocked it with his hand. Julian raised his hand and found that he had an extra ring on his left middle finger and a bracelet on his wrist. Julian looked curiously at the ring and bracelet on his hand. The whole ring was dark green with mysterious patterns engraved on it. From the overall point of view, the pattern on the ring looked like a cunning poisonous snake, while the bracelet presented the whole bright blue, with a mighty eagle engraved on it. Seeing Julian wake up, a unicorn transformed into a human came over. "Dear guest, the queen told me that if you wake up, I will take you to the altar. Now, please come with me." After all, the unicorn tribe led Julian to the depths of the Holy Land. Julian, who followed the unicorn, walked all the way to the altar. Like the future, the location of the altar has not changed, and there are also 4 priests standing in the 4 corners of the altar. He lowered his head and muttered something in his mouth. Seeing Julian coming, Yolanda waved away the clansman who led Julian here. Seeing Yolanda, Julian stretched out his left hand and said, "Yolanda, do you know who gave this to me?" Looking at the ring on Julian's hand and the bracelet on his wrist, Yolanda said, "This is a gift from the surviving second-generation sages who knew you were leaving today to express their gratitude to you. The ring was from Electrolux, the bracelet was from Pamela, the sage who inherited the blood essence of the Eagle King. The necklace was from Emily, the sage who inherited the blood essence of the Badger King, and as for Phoenix, the sage who inherited the blood essence of the Phoenix King, the gift of the sage who inherited the blood essence of the Lion King, and Basil, the sage who inherited the blood essence of the Lion King. They said that it will be handed over to you in the future. As for the role of the other 3 gifts, the 3 of them tell me to enlighten yourself." After hearing Yolanda's words, Julian touched his chest, and sure enough there was something hard. He took it out and saw that it was a brown crystal-like thing, with a badger's shadow in the center of the crystal. Looking at these 3 items, Julian smiled and put them away. Julian, who put away the gifts from the 3 sages, looked at Yolanda with a smile, and said cheaply, "Yolanda, look at how much I sacrificed for the unicorn family, don't you think you will give me some rewards?" Looking at the humble Julian, Yolanda said mercilessly, "Your sacrifice is not for our unicorns but for you humans. Besides, our unicorns have suffered heavy losses after this war. What do you want me to reward you with? I am not like those sages, who have a big family and a big business." After hearing Yolanda's words, Julian put away his mean smile, and then fell into deep thought. Looking at Julian, whose expression suddenly fell into deep thought, Yolanda thought her words were too harsh and wanted to comfort her, but before Yolanda could speak, Julian spoke first. "Since you unicorns don't get any benefits, why don't you just give me yourself?" Julian grinned and said to Yolanda with a thumbs up. After hearing Julian's words, Yolanda's face instantly turned red. She tremblingly pointed at Julian's mouth and stammered, You, Julian, what nonsense are you talking about? I gave it to you. You, why don't you die?" Yolanda, who blushed and finished speaking, covered her face with her hands and ran out of the altar. Looking at Yolanda, who was running away, Julian had question marks on his face, and thought to himself, "Didn't he just want a drop of your blood? As for the reaction so big, it made me look like a bad guy." Seeing Yolanda running away, Julian had no choice but to find a random stone and sit down, and began to study the 3 gifts given to him by the 3 sages. The first is the dark green ring that Electrolux gave him. Julian looked at the pattern on the ring and observed carefully. After a while, Julian found that the pattern on the ring seemed to be seen somewhere and was very familiar. Where did he see it? But Julian couldn't remember it. With the sealing of the astral eye, his memory seemed to be affected to some extent. Holding the ring, Julian thought, "Since I have seen this pattern before, it seems that the existence of this pattern will not cause any great harm, and it is a gift from Electrolux, so it should not be something very dangerous. Thinking like this, Julian slowly input his magic power into the ring. With the input of magic power, Julian's left hand and the entire left arm gradually disappeared into the air. Seeing this, Julian subconsciously used his right hand to touch his left hand, although Julian can feel the existence of his left hand, but his right hand can't touch his left hand anyway. This feeling is very strange. Julian just sat on the stone beside the altar, trying on the ring for hours. When the shy Yolanda returned to the altar again and saw Julian with only half of his body left, his face turned pale all of a sudden. Seeing Yolanda running towards him with a horrified expression, Julian hastily stopped the magic power in the ring and then explained to Yolanda. After listening to Julian's explanation, Yolanda loosened her brows. Then reached out to take the ring that Julian handed over. Carefully observed the pattern on the ring, Yolanda said, "This is an invisible ring, I also know, but what Electrolux sent is not that simple. Look at the magic pattern on it, it's not just the invisible magic pattern, there is another kind, it seems to be some kind of space magic pattern. After you put on the ring, input the magic power, and you will put a part of your body into a different space, that's why you can feel your left hand, but you can't touch it. I think Electrolux gave you the ring as if they wanted you to use it as a storage ring." In the end, Yolanda made a judgment on the performance of the ring, and gave a stern warning. In the future, Julian is not allowed to put his body into the ring at will, because after all, there is space turbulence in the different space. The will never come back. Hearing Yolanda's warning, Julian put the ring back on his finger embarrassingly, and assured Yolanda that he would not put self in another dimension again. After hearing Julian's assurance, Yolanda nodded in satisfaction, then took out a box from behind her, and handed the box to Julian. Yolanda said, "This is the purpose of your coming here, Starlight Gem." Taking the box from Yolanda's hand, he put his hand on the switch of the box and looked at Yolanda. After Yolanda nodded, Julian opened the box vigorously. The Starlight Gem really lived up to its name of Starlight. The moment Julian opened the box, a strong and soft starlight appeared around the altar. After closing the box, the starlight disappeared in an instant. Looking at the box in his hand, Julian was about to say thank you, but Yolanda covered his mouth with his hand. Julian looked at the beautiful unicorn queen in front of him in amazement. He seemed to feel a little bit more reluctant. Everyone has feelings, let alone the Uchiha clan who are cursed by love. Julian understood the look in the queen's eyes. Reluctantly, he closed his half-open mouth. The two continued this action for a long time, until a unicorn priest exited. "My lord queen, the Starry Sky altar has been prepared, and the Starry Sky secret realm can also be opened." Listening to the report of his subordinates, Yolanda slowly withdrew his hand, then smiled and said, "Let's go, I'll see you off." Julian replied with a short, and followed Yolanda to the entrance of the secret realm of the Starry Sky. However, Yolanda did not stop, but walked into the secret realm of the Starry Sky. Julian, who followed Yolanda into the secret realm, looked at the back of the person in front of him and said, "Yolanda, stop here, the unicorn family still needs you." Hearing Julian's words, Yolanda stopped, turned around, walked behind Julian, hugged him tightly from behind Julian, and said in a slightly choked voice, "Don't forget me." Before Julian could answer, Yolanda pushed Julian forward as soon as he exerted force. Julian, who was pushed forward, stepped on the air and returned to the familiar fall again. Julian, who had been falling, held the box in his hand tightly. After a while, suddenly, a bottle fell out of his pocket, following Julian all the way down. The bottle was not big, but the contents inside made Julian frown inadvertently. Putting the box containing the Starry Sky gem into the black snake ring, Julian grabbed the small bottle in front of him with his hand, and there was a drop of silver-gray liquid in the small bottle. As the bottle was grasped by Julian, the silver-gray liquid in the bottle seemed to be attracted by something, and moved towards Julian in the bottle. Holding the bottle tightly in his hand, Julian let out a long sigh, and put the bottle into the black snake. Julian was still falling for an unknown amount of time, when a light suddenly appeared in front of Julian's eyes. Just when Julian thought he had returned to the future, the scene in front of him made Julian's heart tighten. A light curtain appeared in front of Julian, and it showed that Yolanda was being escorted to the scaffold by several well-equipped human soldiers. Yolanda in the light curtain seemed to have sensed something, raised his head and smiled slightly at Julian outside the light curtain, and then took the initiative to walk onto the execution platform. Looking at Yolanda in the light curtain, Julian went down instantly. What happened after I left? Why Yolanda was put to death by humans, and when Julian recovered from the downtime, the picture in the light curtain also disappeared, changed. The new picture that appeared on the light curtain was on a grassland, but instead of endless green grass, there was endless gunpowder smoke and corpses on this grassland. Among the piles of corpses, there are ugly demons, strong-bodied centaurs, and human soldiers in fine King Lee's armor, attire. The screen in the light curtain moved to a scene of fighting. Several human soldiers were besieging a centaur under the command of a general. The drunken human general of the war. And that centaur was the centaur general who thanked him in the commander's tent. The centaur general was very brave, waving the two swords in his hand, forcing back the human soldiers who had been trying to attack him. However, the scene there wasn't a stalemate for too long. The human general took a crossbow bolt from the deputy general's hand, and then aimed at the centaur general's heart to the south, and it was over again here. In the following time, the silver light curtain kept flickering, and the theme of the picture in the light curtain has not changed. They are all pictures of humans slaughtering various magical creature races, and the figures of demons come from time to time in the picture. It also made Julian's heart cold for a while, and he went back to the past. What did he do, and is it really meaningful to save such human beings? Julian, who was thinking about it, was still falling, in every sense, whether it was Julian's person or Julian's heart. After Julian was really down to earth, looking at the exit in front of him, Julian felt a little confused. Slowly walking out of the secret realm of the starry sky, looking at Yolanda, Elliot and other unicorn priests who were praying for him, Julian breathed a sigh of relief, and said to Yolanda, "Yolanda, I came back." Hearing Julian's voice, Yolanda's body trembled, then she suddenly raised her head to look at Julian, and said in a trembling voice, "Welcome back, Julian." Julian stepped forward and hugged the translucent Yolanda, because it was guarded by God of Calling, so Yolanda can be touched at this time. Julian hugged Yolanda for a long time, and then asked softly in Yolanda's ear, "What happened after I left?" "Humans have attacked, and I even saw demons. What is going on? Haven't all the demons been wiped out? Haven't the gates of hell been sealed by you? Why did this happen?" Hearing Julian's question, Yolanda patted Julian's back lightly, and then said slowly, "Don't worry about Julian, you give me the starry sky gem first. Now my body depends on your magic power. It is constructed, so it is not stable. The star gem can make me out of your magic power limit, because our souls are bound, so even if I get out of your magic power limit, I am still your patron saint." After hearing Yolanda's words, Julian let go of Yolanda and took out the box storing the star gem from the black snake and handed it to Yolanda. Yolanda took the box in Julian's hand, gently opened the box, and suddenly the stars shone brightly. Yolanda took out the gem and said to Julian, "I remember I put the gem in your pocket when you entered the secret realm. There's a vial of my blood in it, take it out." Following Yolanda's words, Julian took the vial out of the black snake and handed it to Yolanda. Yolanda took the blood essence that Julian handed her, opened the bottle, poured out half of the blood essence, put it in her palm, and handed the remaining half to Julian. When Julian took the blood essence, Yolanda said, "Julian, when I let you drink this blood essence later, don't hesitate." Julian nodded in understanding. Looking at Julian, who nodded in understanding, Yolanda nodded and then raised the starry sky gem in her hand to her forehead, then closed her eyes and murmured in a low voice. After a while, because of Yolanda's murmur, the starry sky gem shone brightly, and the starlight seemed to light up the entire forbidden forest. Afterwards, Yolanda wiped the blood essence in his hand on the starry sky gem. Then, AJBG quickly said to Julian, "Julian is now, take the blood essence in your hand." Julian heard Yolanda's urging voice, and quickly swallowed the blood essence in his hand. After confirming that Julian had swallowed his blood essence, Yolanda held the star gem and came to Julian, and then imprinted the star gem on Julian's heart. Immediately, the starry sky gem's light flashed and reached its apex again. And Yolanda was completely sucked into the gemstone by the starry sky gem. Julian only felt the stars brighten in front of his eyes, and then passed out. When Julian woke up, it was already dawn. Opening his eyes, Julian looked around, and the surrounding environment was very familiar, because in Julian's memory, he had just woken up in this room not long ago, and this was the tree house in the Holy Land of the Unicorn tribe. Watching Julian wake up, a humanoid unicorn woman walking towards him. Standing in front of Julian, he said with a slightly cold tone, "Wake up, since you're awake, then get out of here quickly, it's already dawn outside, you should go back to the castle." Looking at the strange woman in front of him, Julian was taken aback, and then asked tentatively, "Is it Julian?" The woman nodded, then motioned Julian to get up from the bed. Julian got out of bed obediently, and then walked outside the tree house. At dawn, the unicorns had already returned to their tree nests, and the open space in front of the tree house was also vacated. Looking at the empty space in front of him, Lien seemed to suddenly think of something, turned to Julian and asked, "Julian, where did Yolanda go?" Looking at Julian who was asking him the question, Julian still said in a cold tone, "HMPH, thanks to the fact that you can still think about her Lady Queen, where her Lady Queen has gone, you should guess for yourself." After that, Julian ignored Julian and closed the door of the tree house. Julian stood outside the tree house with a wry smile for a while. When the warm sunlight poured down on Julian's head, Julian looked up at the sun in the sky, and then secretly yelled badly. Today's first session is Professor McGonagall's transformation class. Then Julian hurried to the outside of the unicorn tribe. For some reason, without the guidance of the unicorn, Julian passed the maze in front of the unicorn tribe at a surprisingly fast speed. Then he turned into a crow with animagus, and quickly left the Forbidden Forest. By the time Julian returned to the castle, it was already late, and Professor McGonagall's transfiguration class had already begun. In order not to touch Professor McGonagall's brow, Julian reluctantly returned to the Gryffindor common room. Not long after Julian returned to the Gryffindor common room, a Ravenclaw 5th grader came to the Gryffindor common room, found Julian, handed him a note, and said, "Headmaster Dumbledore asked me to give yours, he said to let you go to his office." Julian took the note suspiciously, thanked the senior, and walked back to the dormitory with the note. Julian sat on his bed, opened the note and read on it. "Dear Julian, I hope that after you come back from the Forbidden Forest, you can come to my office quickly. I have a lot to say to you. Dumbledore. P.S. Recently, I prefer to drink pumpkin juice." Putting down the note in his hand, Julian fell down on his bed and sorted out the chaotic thoughts in his mind. "Then I thought about what Dumbledore was looking for. Since Professor Dumbledore knew that he spent last night in the Forbidden Forest, could it be related to his experience in the Forbidden Forest last night?" Thinking of this, Julian went to the bathroom to wash himself, and then walked out of the lounge towards Dumbledore's office. Arriving at Dumbledore's office door, Julian spoke the password, then knocked on Dumbledore's office door, and after waiting for Dumbledore's response, Julian opened the office door and walked in. After Julian opened the office door and walked in, he found Dumbledore writing something on the office desk. Without disturbing Dumbledore, Julian just found a seat and sat down, waiting for Dumbledore to finish his business. After about a quarter of an hour, Dumbledore finally finished dealing with the affairs in his hands, put down the quill in his hand, looked at Julian, and said, "Sorry Julian, as the headmaster of Hogwarts, I have too many chores to do. Deal with it, sorry to keep you waiting." Julian responded lightly, "It's okay, it should be." After Julian responded to Dumbledore, he found that Dumbledore didn't seem to be planning to speak first, but Julian could only look at Dumbledore and spoke first, "As the principal looking for me today?" Dumbledore looked at the slightly dull boy in front of him without speaking, just looked at Julian so lightly, and the principal's office fell into silence again for a while. In the principal's office, Julian and Dumbledore stared at each other with big eyes and small eyes. After a long time, Dumbledore sighed, and then asked Julian, "Julian, is there anything you want to tell me about the Forbidden Forest last night?" Julian was silent for a moment, then said firmly to Dumbledore, "No, Professor, I have nothing to say to you." After hearing Julian's firm answer, Dumbledore sighed again, and then, with a wave of his wand, a wooden box that looked very old-fashioned appeared on the table. Dumbledore looked at the wooden box and said to Julian, "Remember the last time you came to my office and asked me questions about demons and hell? I think you should have the answer yourself now. when I asked you not to go pursue, but the choice of fate is difficult to change," Dumbledore said, and pushed the box on the table forward, towards Julian. Then, Dumbledore waved his wand again, and something that looked like animal skin appeared on the table. Dumbledore picked up the animal skin, and said to Julian, "Julian, this is left by my ancestor, Phoenix, one of the 12 sages of the second generation, and it has been passed down from generation to generation in my family." When the ancestor of Phoenix was about to die, he told his descendants, he said, if his descendants meet a student of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry named Julian Willis, they will combine this animal skin with give him the wooden box and tell him it's a belated gift. Julian opened his eyes when he heard Dumbledore's words, and then said in surprise, "Professor, you are actually a descendant of Phoenix." Dumbledore nodded, then pushed the animal hide and the box and said to Julian, "Put away the box and the animal hide, these two things have been handed down in our family for so long. But no one can discover their mysteries. It seems that the ancestors have great confidence in you, Julian." After hearing Dumbledore's words, Julian hesitated for a moment, then reached out to pick up the animal skin on the table. However, just when Julian's hand touched the animal skin, a small magic circle began to slowly appear on the animal skin. With the appearance of the magic circle, an illusory figure appeared above the animal skin, which was the Phantom of Phoenix. The Phantom of Phoenix looked at Julian, and then said with a smile, "Hello, little guy, it seems that you saw my message, which means that my descendants have already contacted you, right? Is my descendant right next to you now? Is he teaching at Hogwarts now? Has he become the headmaster of Hogwarts? When I was about to die, it was written in my last words, I want my descendants to be the headmaster of Hogwarts no matter what, so that I can overwhelm you, Julian. Think about my descendants being your teacher or even your headmaster, and you when you respectfully call my descendants teachers, that scene must be very interesting." Hearing this, Julian felt that his face was covered with black lines. If this guy was right in front of him, he would definitely give him a blast. However, Phoenix's phantom didn't care about Julian's expression, but continued talking on its own. "I know you must be looking like you want to eat me alive and can't do anything about me, ha, I like the feeling that you want to hit me but can't." Phoenix continued to tease Julian, and then Phoenix changed the subject and said again, "Okay, let's stop here for the chat, and I hope you can listen to my descendants together, because I hope my descendants can help you face your things to face. In order to prevent my lovely descendants from being overwhelmed with curiosity, I used a piece of your hair when making this magic circle, so only when you personally touch this animal skin, I leave only then will the magic circle slowly appear, and you will also see this phantom of me. I don't know if my magic can last for such a long time, so I let the descendants continue to add magic to this animal skin. Since you can see my phantom, it means that my magic has been handed down to the era you were in, the future I yearn for. Julian, do you know that shortly after you left, many things happened on the mainland, and all of these things were caused by human greed? I don't know if you know what happened after you left, but I want to tell you, Julian, there is nothing wrong with humans doing this. I know you can't accept this statement, so I hope you can treat this result rationally. It has already happened, and you can't change it and I can't change it. It is meaningless to pursue the truth of the past. So, Julian, I hope you must be sensible. Before the war came, I asked the White Tiger King to make a prophecy about the future of mankind. The prophecy said, when the man of destiny returns to the past with the starry sky, the future will change. You, Julian, it is the man of fate. 0. So Julian, whether it is the remaining demons in the world, or the crisis that mankind will face in the future, these are all your responsibilities, because your arrival has changed the original future of the entire continent. I know that you must be dissatisfied with human beings, but, Julian, don't forget that you are also a human being. No matter how disappointed you are with human beings, you cannot give up human beings, because this is your responsibility as a human being. So I beg you, Julian, I beg you, save human beings. When human beings make mistakes again in the future because of their ignorance, forgive them, save them. This is my last request as the 12 sages. After all, the Phantom of Phoenix bowed to Julian. Then he continued, in addition, the animal skin is a map. As for the map of where to go, you will know, and the box contains my gift to you. You need to use your eyes to open the box. After speaking, Phoenix's phantom disappeared. Julian turned his gaze to the magic circle on the animal skin and fell silent. After a moment of silence, Julian turned his gaze to Dumbledore. After a long time, Julian asked, "Professor, what do you think about this?" Dumbledore thought for a while, and then said, "As I said, Julian, this is a choice of fate that we ordinary people cannot change. Since fate chose you, then I will try my best to help you as the ancestors said." After listening to Dumbledore's words, Julian nodded, and then said to Dumbledore, "Professor, this matter is not that simple. I still don't know what happened back then, and I don't know whether it is right to help mankind. I don't know, if we save mankind this time, will mankind repeat the mistakes of the past again? I don't know. Professor, I don't know, ever since I came out of the unicorn's secret space in the starry sky last night, I have been a little confused. Sorry, Professor, you should keep the animal skin and box first, I need to think about it again." After finishing speaking, Julian walked towards the office door. When Julian was about to walk out of the gate, Dumbledore's words came from behind, "Julian, this is fate, it's yours and mine." Julian paused, then continued to walk outside, leaving Dumbledore's office worker. As Julian walked out of Dumbledore's office, he leaned his back against the door of Dumbledore's office, thinking. After thinking for a long time, Julian sighed and walked towards the Tower of Gryffindor. On the way, Julian ran into Harry and the others who had just finished class, and Harry and the others asked him where he went last night, and whether what happened in the Forbidden Forest last night had anything to do with him. Julian didn't answer, and still looked preoccupied, turning a deaf ear to the questions from Harry and the others. Julian stayed like that for a whole day. Looking at Julian, who seemed to be thinking about some major life event all day, Harry said with a worried face, "Julian, what's going on? What happened in the Forbidden Forest last night, since Julian's night patrol in the Forbidden Forest unusual?" "Yeah, what happened in the Forbidden Forest that made him look like this? No, I can't let him go like this anymore. Julian looks like he was cursed by something dirty that night. Forbidden Forest Night Watch, especially Leon. Something must have happened to Julian, which had a great impact on Julian, but Julian didn't tell us what happened, and we couldn't help him. What should we do?" Hermione's tone was anxious. Looking at the anxious two, Ronald said, "We can't guide Julian, but someone can." After hearing Ronald's words, Harry looked excited, and then said, "Yes, we can find Professor Dumbledore, maybe he can ask Julian what happened." Ronald and Hermione nodded, and the three of them ran towards the headmaster's office. However, to the disappointment of the three, Dumbledore said that he could not help Julian. Disappointed, the three walked out of the principal's office. Just as the three were preparing to meet in the Gryffindor lounge, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle appeared in sight of the three. Seeing Malfoy, Harry seemed to think of something, and excitedly said to Ronald and Hermione, "I see, there is one more person who can help Julian." Following Harry's gaze, Hermione also saw the three of Malfoy, and then Hermione seemed to have thought of something, and excitedly said to Harry, "I thought of it too, yes, there is one more person who can definitely help Julian." Ronald looked at the two with a bewildered face, and asked cutely, "Who are you talking about?" Looking at the cute Ronald, Hermione rested her forehead and sighed, then said softly, "I'm sorry Ronald, I overestimated you, you don't care who it is, just follow me and Harry." After saying that, Hermione ran towards Malfoy in the distance. Looking at Hermione's back, Ronald turned his head to Harry and asked, "Harry, am I being despised?" Suppressing a smile, Harry patted Ronald's back with his hand, and chased after Hermione without saying anything. Looking at Harry, who also left, Ronald said angrily, "I must have been despised." After all, he also chased after the two of them. And Malfoy looked at the three people rushing towards him, and subconsciously wanted to hide, but as soon as Malfoy got behind Goyle, the three of Harry had already run to him. Looking at Malfoy hiding behind Goyle, Harry asked strangely, "Malfoy, what are you hiding?" Malfoy stuck his head out from behind Goyle, looked at it, Julian didn't seem to be here, then he got out from behind Goyle, and said to the three of Harry in a friendly voice, "No, it's nothing, just to tease you." Hermione looked at Malfoy speechlessly and said, "Are you afraid that Julian will trouble you, because you were absent from work this morning?" Seeing that Hermione pointed it out, Malfoy blushed a little, and said embarrassedly, "No, that's not the case, that's right. By the way, did Julian ask you to arrest me?" Looking at Malfoy, who had become so virtuous, Harry and the others couldn't help laughing. The Malfoy in front of him didn't have the arrogant appearance when he just started school. Julian's reputation as the big devil is well deserved. Looking at Malfoy in front of him, Harry, who was the most victimized by Julian, suddenly had a feeling of empathy, stepped forward and patted Malfoy on the shoulder, looked at Malfoy sympathetically, and then sighed. Seeing Harry reacting like this, Malfoy's face turned pale in an instant. Malfoy said in a trembling voice with a tragic face, "Potter, tell me what Julian wants to do with me, so I can prepare myself mentally." Looking at the two people in front of her, Hermione slapped her forehead again and cursed secretly, "There are two more idiots." After cursing, Hermione said, "Okay, stop playing tricks, Harry, the most important thing for us now is Julian's business." Hearing Hermione's words, Harry quickly reacted, put away his sympathetic expression and asked seriously, "Malfoy, do you know where Professor Snape is now?" Ha! Malfoy was obviously taken aback by Harry's question. Malfoy turned his gaze to Ronald, and found that Ronald was as confused as himself. Thinking that Ronald was unreliable, Malfoy turned his gaze to Hermione again, and Hermione nodded affirmatively to him. After getting Hermione's affirmative answer, Malfoy asked tentatively, "Is it related to Julian?" Harry and Hermione nodded affirmatively. Seeing Hermione and Harry nodding, Malfoy thought for a moment and then turned around, letting Crabbe and Goyle go back first, then turned around and said to the three, "You and I." Bo. So, the three of Harry followed Malfoy towards Snape's collection room. On the way, Malfoy asked with some doubts, "Is there something wrong with Julian recently? I found that since I came back from the Forbidden Forest last time, Julian's behavior has become a little weird. Although I can't tell what is weird, but it just doesn't feel right." After hearing Malfoy's words, Harry said, "It's because we found something wrong with Julian, so we wanted to find Professor Snape, and see if Professor Snape could find out what happened to Julian. We have already looked for Dumbledore before, Professor, but Professor Dumbledore can't do anything, so we can only pin our hopes on Professor Snape." After listening to Harry's narration, Malfoy nodded and stopped talking. When everyone came to Snape's private storage room, Snape was about to leave here. Harry saw Snape and immediately went up to meet him, and told Snape why he was looking for him. After listening to Harry's narration, Snape frowned, then thought for a moment, and said to Harry, "Potter, ask Willis to meet me tonight, he knows where to find me." After all, Snape left without looking back. Looking at Snape who left, Malfoy said, "Potter, don't worry too much, since Professor Snape asked Julian to find him, it means that Professor Snape is sure to cure Julian. Well, I'm going back first, see you tomorrow morning." After all, Malfoy also left here and walked back the way he came. Harry looked at Hermione, who was a bit worried, and said, "Hermione, what Malfoy said is right, Snape is surprisingly nice to Julian, since he made a move, there shouldn't be a big problem, let's go back now and tell Julian the news." Hermione nodded, and left Snape's four-person storage room first, and walked towards the Gryffindor Tower. Looking at the departing Hermione, Ronald fell into deep thought. Looking at Ronald, who was lost in thought, Harry asked curiously, "What did you think of, Ronald?" Ronald raised his head to look at Harry and said excitedly, "So the one who can help Julian is Snape, why did I ask Malfoy?" Looking at Ronald, who was about to compliment me, Harry said helplessly, "Ronald, you are amazing, in every sense." After finishing speaking, Harry left here. Looking at Harry's leaving back, Ronald muttered to Harry's words just now, "Harry should have praised me just now, why did I feel something is wrong? Hey, Harry, don't you go too fast, wait for me." When the three of Harry returned to the Gryffindor lounge, they found Julian teasing Hedwig with a note in one hand. The three of Harry came over and asked Julian, "Julian, are you free tonight?" Julian turned his head to look at Harry and asked, What do you want, Harry?" "Well, it's Professor Snape who has something to do with you. He asked you to go to him at night, saying that you know where to find him," Harry replied. Julian nodded to show that he understood. Harry asked cautiously, "So are you going up tonight?" Julian looked at Harry, and asked with some doubts, "Harry, you're a little strange, when did you start caring about me and Professor Snape?" Harry's face froze, and then he smiled mischievously, not responding to Julian. Julian ignored Harry's embarrassment, turned his head, continued to tease Hedwig and said, "I'll go tonight." Hearing Julian's affirmative answer, the three of Harry looked at each other in surprise, and immediately replied at the same time, okay. Putting the note in his hand on the table, Julian got up and went back to the boys' dormitory. Looking at the note Julian left on the table, Ronald asked curiously, "Who do you think sent the note to Julian? Why don't we take a look?" It's wrong for Ronald to do this. We shouldn't mess with Julian's things, especially things like belief. Hermione stopped him. Seeing that Hermione stopped him, Ronald tempted Hermione and said, "Don't you want to know why Julian became like this? Maybe there is a clue in this note." Sure enough, Hermione was shaken after listening to Ronald's words. Looking at the shaken Hermione, Ronald continued, "Maybe there will be a solution to Julian's state in the note." After hearing Ronald's words, Hermione hesitated and said, "Is this okay?" Looking at Hermione, who was still hesitating, Harry hurriedly said, "If you don't tell me about this matter, I won't tell you, and Ronald won't tell you, Julian won't know, and if it's like what Ronald said, this note will have the solution to Julian's problem." After listening to Ronald and Harry's persuasion, Hermione gritted her teeth and said, "Just this once, everything is for Julian." Seeing Hermione let go, Ronald and Harry quickly said excitedly, "Of course, everything is for Julian." Immediately Ronald rushed to the side of the note, looked at it, and saw the following on the note. "Dear Julian, Ronan the Centaur came to me this morning and asked me to send you a message, saying that your agreement with the Centaur tonight will be cancelled first, and the Centaur will notify you later when your status returns. P.S. Don't get too close to the Centaurs, their whole race is very extreme. Hagrid." After reading the note, Ronald exclaimed, "It's Hagrid's note, but why did Hagrid pass on the message for the Centaur? Is there any agreement between Julian and the Centaur? Could it be this agreement that brought Julian into what he is now?" Hermione nodded and said, "It's possible, but what agreement can Julian have with the Centaur? What happened in the Forbidden Forest that night? If only Julian hadn't been left to track down the unicorn by himself," Harry said impatiently. Finally, Hermione said helplessly, "It seems that we can only rely on Professor Snape. I hope Professor Snape can persuade Julian." Ronald shook his fist and swore, "If Snape can bring Julian back to life, I will never call him Old Bat again." After listening to Ronald's words, Harry nodded and responded, "Me too." Hermione smiled and said, "You should respect Professor Snape, because he is really good at potions." At this time, Julian was lying on his bed calling for Yolanda in his heart, but no matter how Julian called, Yolanda did not respond to Julian, as if Yolanda was asleep. Julian tried to make himself fall asleep, but although Julian fell asleep, he never reached the sea of his spirit and magic power. Instead, he fell asleep and slept all day long. At night, after waking up, Julian simply washed up and left the Gryffindor Tower, heading towards Snape's underground laboratory. Now that the horse people have temporarily cancelled the meeting, it will be at least 1 month later until the next full moon. I hope that in this more than a month, I can figure out what happened at that time and what the disaster that mankind is about to face is. Thinking so, Julian walked slowly to the underground potions laboratory, knocked on the door, and without waiting for a response from Snape, Julian pushed it open and walked in. Snape, who was concocting the potion, looked up and saw Julian, so he stopped the stirring stick in his hand, and then put away the semi-finished potion on the table with a wave of his wand. Then with a wave of the wand in his hand, a pile of unprocessed potion ingredients and a clean crucible appeared on the experimental table. Snape beckoned Julian to the laboratory bench and pointed to a medicinal material and asked, "Warless, tell me, what is this?" Julian replied fluently, "This is sobriety grass, which has the effect of waking people up from a coma, but the smell is extremely pungent." "And this one?" Snape asked again. "This is cold grass, which has a refreshing effect. It tastes slightly bitter and pungent." "Professor, are you planning to make a refreshing potion? What are you doing with this simple potion?" Julian asked curiously. After hearing Julian's words, Snape snorted softly, and then said, "Simple, you think it's very simple, don't you? Since you think it's very simple, then you can refine it." With that said, Snape let the test bench out. After a little hesitation, Julian walked to the experimental table and began to operate. At the same time, he recalled the refining steps and functions of the refreshment potion. The refreshment potion required a total of 18 kinds of medicinal materials, and these 18 kinds of medicinal materials were not scarce. Medicinal ingredients are easy to refine and have the effect of waking people up from a coma and boosting one's spirits. Therefore, this kind of potion is very common in the wizarding world. You can buy high-quality refreshing potions at any drugstore. Why is Professor Snape still? I was specially asked to refine it, but I don't understand. When Julian was thinking about this, he had already prepared the medicinal materials, and all the medicinal materials were processed separately. Immediately, Julian started refining the refreshing potion. The refreshing potion was really simple, and it took Julian less than 3 hours to complete the refining. Looking at the silver potion exuding mint fragrance in the pot, and the silver cyclone above the potion, Julian nodded with satisfaction, and then filled the potion into the prepared bottle and pressed it. Immediately, Julian turned his gaze to Snape and said, "Professor, the refining potion is complete." Snape looked at the potion and nodded in satisfaction, then said to Julian, "Drink it." Julian was taken aback, wondering if he heard it wrong, so he asked suspiciously, "Sorry, what did you say, Professor?" "Drink it," Snape repeated again, a little impatience still on his face. Seeing the impatience on Snape's face, Julian had no choice but to obediently pick up the refreshing potion he had just made and drank it. The potion is not hot, even though it has just come out of the pot, but the potion is not hot at all, but because of the relationship between mint leaves and cold herbs, the potion is still a little cool. After taking a bottle of medicine, Julian felt a coolness rushing straight to his brain. A sober feeling instantly occupied Julian's brain. There is a feeling that I have become smarter. Julian, sober-minded, knew in an instant why Snape had called him here tonight. Looking at Julian, whose eyes had recovered, Snape said, "Pick-up potions can refresh people's minds, but they can't make people smart. Willis, do you understand?" Hearing Snape's nonsensical words, Julian took a step back one after another, then bowed to Snape, and said thankfully, "Thank you, Professor Snape, I understand." Seeing Julian's actions, Snape didn't say anything, but silently accepted Julian's gift. After Julian straightened up, Snape said, "Now that you understand, go back quickly and remember to hand me a detailed paper on refreshing potions tomorrow." Julian nodded in understanding, then turned and left the underground potions laboratory. Julian, who left the potions lab, recalled Phoenix's words, and then laughed at himself. Phoenix is right, things have already happened anyway, why am I still confused here, am I not disturbing myself like this? Having figured it out, Julian felt that his steps seemed to be much lighter. Julian made his way back to the Gryffindor common room relaxed. When Julian pushed open the door of the lounge and entered the lounge, he found that the three of Harry were sleeping on the sofa in the lounge, and even Malfoy was there. Curious, Julian went up to wake up the four of them, and asked, "Why are you all asleep here, especially you, Malfoy? You're not sleeping in the Slytherin lounge, what are you doing here?" Hearing Julian's question, Malfoy said with an embarrassed expression, "Ah, I heard that you were called by Professor Snape, so I wanted to come over to check on the situation, hee." Julian asked suspiciously, "I heard that I was called by Professor Snape, so you came to check the situation?" Malfoy nodded frantically in the affirmative. "I'm afraid it's Professor Snape you went to and asked him to come to me?" Julian asked suspiciously. Hearing Julian's suspicion, Malfoy's face turned green, and he hastily denied, I'm not, don't talk nonsense." Seeing Malfoy's reaction, Julian was even more sure. Julian took a step forward and grabbed Malfoy's wrist, and said with a dark face, "I said, why did Professor Snape suddenly ask me to go to the hospital tonight? Looking for him, it turns out that the problem is with you, Malfoy, because I still have a paper on refreshing potions to write." Seeing Julian's kind expression, Malfoy almost cried in fright. At this time, Hermione said, "Okay, Julian, don't scare Malfoy, we are also for your own good. Since we came back from the Forbidden Forest last time, we found you weird, especially what happened in the Forbidden Forest last night. It's such a big thing, and you seem more serious today. We went to Professor Snape because we were worried about you." After hearing Hermione's words, Julian turned his head to Harry and Ronald. Both of them looked at him with worried eyes. Looking at the four people in front of him, Julian fell silent. He went to find Professor Snape at 8 o'clock in the evening, and he stayed outside for nearly 3 hours in total, including refining medicine and so on. In other words, these four people actually waited, looking at the dark sockets on the four people's eyes and the bloodshot eyes. Julian suddenly remembered the scene when he came out of Dumbledore's office that morning. Looking at the silent Julian, everyone thought he was angry, but when Harry and the others were wondering if they should apologize to Julian, Julian smiled. Julian smiled happily. He stepped forward and hugged Harry and the others, and said, "Although one family does not speak two different languages, I still want to say, thank you all." Hearing Julian's words, Harry and the others also laughed, and the five of them laughed like fools in the common room. Their smiles were silly and warm. After all, Julian still didn't tell Harry and the others what he experienced last night, because these things were too early for Harry and the others. Facing the inquiry from Harry and others, Julian also directly refused to tell them, and promised that he would resolve this matter with Dumbledore. After hearing Julian's guarantee, they didn't ask any more questions. After all, in the eyes of the young wizards, Dumbledore was the strongest person in the world, and there was nothing he couldn't solve. Afterwards, Harry lent Malfoy the invisibility cloak, and Julian turned Malfoy into a crow with an animagus and sent Malfoy back to the Slytherin lounge. Then returned to the Gryffindor tower with Harry's invisibility cloak. By the time Julian returned to the Gryffindor common room, it was empty. Julian returned to the boys' dormitory and found that Harry and Ronald had fallen asleep. Julian carefully put Harry's invisibility cloak back into Harry's box, and then went to bed. In the dream, when Julian came to the Sea of Spirit and Magic Power again, Julian found that great changes had taken place here. The lake really became as wide as the sea, and the grass on the grassland became more lush. The most notable change is the tree house by the lake. The huge tree house is so conspicuous in the empty world. The tree house was almost the same as the one in the Unicorn Sanctuary. Julian walked quickly to the tree house and knocked on the door anxiously, and the door opened almost instantly. Looking at Yolanda standing inside the door, Julian was so excited that he wanted to go forward to hug Yolanda, but unfortunately, Yolanda hid from him. Watching Julian slam into the door frame as she dodged, Yolanda smiled, and she smiled happily, like a young human girl. Julian looked at Yolanda, who was smiling prettily, covered his forehead embarrassingly, and smiled awkwardly. After the two had had enough laughs, Yolanda let Julian into the house and brought Julian a cup of tea. Holding the teacup in his hand, Julian looked at Yolanda in a little surprise. "There is still tea here. It looks like you are doing well here. Speaking of Yolanda, what is your situation now?" Yolanda did not answer Julian's question immediately, but quietly sipped the tea in her hand. Seeing that Yolanda seemed unwilling to answer his own question, Julian also began to imitate Yolanda and began to drink tea quietly. After an unknown amount of time, Yolanda put down the teacup, looked at Julian and asked, "Do you know why? You want to find me during the day but I don't want to see you." Julian thought for a while, and then replied, "It's because I walked into a dead end, got into a dead end, right?" Yolanda nodded, and then said, "And you didn't disappoint me, you walked out very quickly. In fact, as Phoenix said, things have already happened, and there is no point in pursuing the truth. We can now, all you have to do is seize the present and face the future." Julian nodded in agreement. Immediately, Julian said, "Actually, it's not difficult to know what happened back then. The human king made some kind of deal with the demons, so that some demons survived. The content of the deal was to use the power of demons to help humans eliminate other demons. The magical creature race unifies the continent, otherwise it would be very difficult to achieve this with human strength, and with the personality of the human king, those remaining demons will not have any good results, right?" Yolanda nodded and said, "What you said is generally correct, but there is one thing you said that is not very accurate." Julian asked curiously, "What is it?" Yolanda replied, "Actually, all of us, including the centaur, the 12 clans of magical creatures, and you, we underestimated humans from the very beginning. The human king is called Brady, and Brady has reigned for 5 years. 10 years, these 50 years, he has done a lot of things. Since he came to power, he has made great efforts to excavate the ruins of the ancient elves without telling us the 12 tribes and the centaurs, and in the ruins. The technologies left by the elves, and they continue to use these technologies to develop armaments. After you left, I once saw with my own eyes an elite squad of hundreds of people, besieged and killed an adult dragon head-on, and the price paid by this squad was the casualties of less than 10 people and the loss of some equipment. Julian, you have to know that this is a feat even if it is placed on other magical creature races. Therefore, it took humans 100 years to arrange a huge bureau, and whether it's the devil, our 12 tribes, or the centaur, they are all part of this game. I don't know how Brady did it. He even counted you. After thinking about it, it's terrifying. Julian was silent for a while, and then said, "Were humans so strong back then?" Yolanda nodded loosely. Seeing Yolanda nodding, Julian asked in puzzlement, "Since humans are so strong, why do they use the power of demons to start such a big war? What good does this do for humans?" "Are you stupid?" Yolanda scolded coquettishly, and then said, "You humans are strong, and our 12 races are not weak, okay? You humans may be able to resist 4 or 5 of our races at the same time, but you absolutely can't resist all of our 12 races, so humans choose to open the gates of hell, use the power of demons to weaken the power of our 12 races, and then pretend to be defeated by demons, and let demons destroy the capital of human beings. We are indeed accumulating troops secretly. After the decisive battle, our 12 clans and the Centaur clans were severely injured and sent troops to exterminate us. I have to say that you humans really have great potential. Brady and his grandfather and father, it took 3 generations and more than 100 years to overturn the pattern of the entire continent. Qian Li's. Julian thought for a moment, then asked again, "So how did those demons deal with it? Have they been killed?" Yolanda shook his head and said, "No, those demons are just sealed. Brady wants to treat this demon army as a hidden army, and wait until when the human race declines. They used this hidden army as a bargaining chip to restore the rule of mankind. However, it was this hidden army that became the greatest disaster for mankind." Julian asked curiously, Why, this demon army will become a disaster for mankind?" Yolanda replied, "Back when Brady's grandfather proposed to use the devil didn't use him again. The devil calculated that Brady would not send them back to hell, so the devils fought for the human race, but also secretly left some demons in the world, and when this demon troop completed its mission and was sealed by humans, those hidden demons came out one after another. The demons bewitched humans, tempted them to degenerate, and then the human body is used as a lair to breed new demons. Over the years, the demons have been hiding somewhere and have not been discovered by humans. Some demons that were occasionally discovered were quickly wiped out by humans, leaving only a few as legend." After hearing Yolanda's words, Julian said in surprise, "Then you mean, those demons will come back again?" Yolanda shook his head and said, "Not only." Seeing Yolanda's reaction, Julian's face couldn't be tense, and he lost his voice. "Is there anything more serious than the devil's comeback?" Yolanda nodded and said, "Remember the prophecy that Phoenix said?" Julian nodded to show that he still remembered. Yolanda continued, "Actually, there is still the second half of the White Tiger King's prophecy. At that time, only half of it was told to Phoenix. The complete prophecy should be, when the man of destiny returns to the past with the starry sky, the future, then there will be changes. When the man of destiny returns to the future again, the world will soon face a disaster more terrifying than demons. When the White Tiger King finished this prophecy and died, such a strong backlash shows the prophecy accuracy, although I don't know what disaster the world is about to face, but since the prophecy says it is more terrifying than demons, then our top priority now is to accumulate power, the power of the former 12 kings, the power of wizards, the power of muggles' power, and so on, and then face the disaster together." Julian asked suspiciously, "Didn't the prophecy mention the time and place of the disaster?" Yolanda shook his head. Seeing Yolanda shaking her head, Julian's heart tightened, and he hurriedly asked, "Does that mean that the disaster may come in the next second, or even has already come?" Yolanda shook his head and said, "No, although the prophecy did not mention the specific time when the disaster will come, but you must know that the life of our magical creatures is much longer than that of your humans, so we magical creatures and you, the concept of time is different. The White Tiger King said not long ago. In fact, we still have at least 5 years of preparation time. Within 5 years, we must gather all the calendar emperors that can be assembled." Julian nodded and said, "Tomorrow I will go to Professor Dumbledore, be honest, exchange information, and discuss what to do in the future." Yolanda nodded in agreement. Then Julian said, "Okay, let's not talk about this. Yolanda, what kind of posture do you exist now?" Yolanda thought for a while, and replied, "Before you took back the starry sky gem. My soul was not stable, so I was attached to your Patronus charm as a patron saint. Bound to your soul, so your patron saint is my unicorn form, but after you took back the starry sky gem and the bottle of my blood essence, my soul, which has absorbed half of the blood essence, is more stable, so I don't need to be attached anymore on your patron saint spell. I used the other half of the blood essence on your body, transformed your bloodline, and made your bloodline more like the bloodline of our unicorn family. After all, what a human body can hold, the magic power is too little. After listening to Yolanda's words, Julian thought for a while and asked, no wonder my magic power has increased so much. My current magic power is almost catching up with Professor Dumbledore. Oh yes. Then won't my patron saint spell be you in the future? Yolanda knocked on Julian's head and said, stupid, although I don't need to be attached to your Patronus charm, my soul is still bound to your soul, so your Patronus, no matter what the circumstances, well, it's me, it won't change. Julian nodded and said, oh, I see, Yolanda, what you mean is that we will never be separated from now on. After hearing Julian's words, Yolanda's face turned red instantly, and then she stammered and shouted, stupid, stupid, stupid Julian, you, what are you talking about, you fool? After Yolanda finished shouting, just as Julian was about to say something, a familiar pulling force instantly acted on Julian, and Julian was ejected by his sea of consciousness again. The next morning, Julian got up early, and then came to the common room, thinking that he still had a treatise on refreshing potions to write, so he waved his wand and took the potions he had prepared a long time ago. The test questions were placed on the table in the common room, and then he spread out the parchment, took out a quill pen and began to write the paper. By the time Harry arrived in the common room with Malfoy and Hermione, Julian was halfway through his thesis. Seeing the three people coming, Julian pushed the test questions, then continued to write his thesis, and said to the three without raising his head, I still have half a thesis to write, you should do what I wrote first. The test questions will be corrected for you when I finish writing the thesis, and I will judge the scores. If anyone has the worst grades, you know, my method takes a total of 1 hour, so hurry up and do it, AJBF. After finishing speaking, Julian began to concentrate on writing the thesis again, ignoring Malfoy and Harry who were already pale, and Hermione who was eager to try. Half an hour later, Julian finished his thesis, and then began to read Hermione's test paper. Shweba is worthy of being a Shweba. After reading Hermione's test paper, he wrote a big, oh excellent, then praised Hermione and said, that's right, Hermione's papers are all right, Harry and Malfoy are going to work harder, look at how fast and correct Hermione is. Immediately, Julian turned Hermione's test paper over and began to instruct Hermione on more profound medicine knowledge. Half an hour later, Julian forcibly put away the test paper between Harry and Malfoy. After a while, Julian handed out their test papers to their hands. They saw the results in their hands, and then looked at each other warily. Harry took the lead and asked, oh dear Draco, what's your grade? Malfoy shook the goosebumps on his body, and then said, you tell me first, and I'll tell you later. No, you tell me first, and I'll tell you later. Harry responded, not to be outdone. Seeing how the two of them were saying each other, Julian said impatiently, isn't it just a grade, what's the fuss, I'll count 1, 2, 3, and you two put the paper face up on the table at the same time. Hearing Julian's words, they hesitated and nodded at the same time. Seeing that the two agreed, Julian began to say, then you two are ready, I will start counting, 1, 2, 3. When Julian finished counting, Harry and Malfoy slapped their papers on the table at the same time. When Malfoy saw the big A pass on Harry's paper, Malfoy started laughing. And Harry looked bitter OTW after seeing the E good on Malfoy's paper, and then looked at Julian pitifully. Julian ignored Harry's pitiful face and said, Malfoy is fine this time, well, you can stand on your side. Hearing Julian's words, Malfoy immediately grinned and twirled his buttocks and got on the sofa next to him. Then Julian turned his eyes to Harry and said with a serious face, Harry, you disappointed me this time, tell me, do you choose to copy the paper 30 times, or write an A on your face, then have a day? Listening to Julian's punishment, Harry's face became even more bitter. And looking at Harry with a bitter face, Malfoy was very happy, and kept whispering in Harry's ear, Harry, choose the second option. There is no pain in choosing the second option. If you choose the first option, look at how many words there are in this paper, when can you just copy it? Ignoring Malfoy's taunt, Harry continued to look at Julian pitifully, but Julian was unmoved. In the end, helpless Harry chose the first option among Malfoy's pity. Ignoring Harry's expression, Julian began to explain the contents of the paper, and after Julian finished speaking, he said to Hermione, "I won't go to Hermione's herbal medicine class today. Please help me take a leave of absence, I have something to do going to Professor Dumbledore." Hermione nodded to show that she understood. At 9 o'clock in the morning, after everyone had gone to class, Julian walked out of the common room alone and walked towards the principal's office. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.